Chapter 424. When the news that Fang Chaoyun wanted to join the Celestial Society spread, many people were stupefied. Dragon Audiobook Network. Fang Chaoyun was a peak great astral lord and a disciple of Shi Dao Heaven's Song Fei. How could he have joined Elder Zi Luo's Heavenly God Association? Weren't they irreconcilable enemies? Therefore, many people scoffed at this news at first. Moreover, the Heavenly God Association didn't say anything, so they regarded it as fake news. However, Fang Chaoyun himself quickly made a statement to prove that his application to join the Heavenly God Society was true and that he really wanted to join the Heavenly God Society. The Heavenly Deities Association is an organization that belongs to the deities and the Star Lord. It doesn't belong to anyone, so why can't I join? Old Master Fang's powerful and resonant question was like a sharp sword that pierced through the paper-thin window in front of the Heavenly God Assembly. Elder Zi Luo had single-handedly established the Heavenly Deity Organization, and he was the one with the most authority in the organization. However, this didn't mean that he could openly say that the Heavenly Deity Organization was his alone. The Heavenly Deity Society's flourishing development was mainly due to the fact that some Starlords wanted to curry favor with the Heavenly Deity Society. They also wanted to join a group that seemed incomparably powerful. After all, there had never been an organization with a Dao integration stage cultivator in the entire heavenly realm. Previously, Zhuangxian and the others had been publicizing their plan in public, so no one had realized that something was wrong. Only Song Fei had noticed the flaw hidden in the deepest part of their plan. The organization was open to the public, but the Dao integration practitioners had their own standpoints. If Fang Chaoyun's request to join them was rejected, then all those who had grudges with Old Man Zi Luo would have to reconsider their positions. In other words, from the moment Fang Chaoyun accepted his application, the Divine God Society's attitude was no longer that important. Even if bystanders still enthusiastically signed up, the Heavenly God Society wouldn't dare to wantonly accept people like before. This was because Fang Chaoyun's actions were also a warning to the Heavenly God Society. It didn't matter if his application was accepted or not, but who knew if there would be Shi Daoqian's spies among the people who applied? Song Fei's move had brought out the deepest thoughts in people's hearts. I have already rejected Fang Chaoyun's application. I did not give any reason, Zhuangxian said. Shui Ren nodded. At this time, instead of finding some specious excuse, it was better not to explain. In any case, everyone knew why. But then Zhuangxian said, out of the people who joined in the past 2 days, 2 have chosen to leave. There are a few who need to be re-examined. There is even an old member who was discovered to be from Shi Daoqian. Shui Ren was silent for a moment. Many of the old members didn't even know of my existence when they joined, but no one can guarantee that they won't rebel in the future. Zhuangxian's expression was still cold. He didn't care that the people he was talking about were all his seniors. We can't take the risk now. Shui Ren could only sigh again. He knew that Zhuangxian was right. Song Fei could calmly make his move, but they couldn't take the risk, especially at this critical moment. The deadline of 10 years was just around the corner. If there was a slip-up in the organization at this time, the entire Heavenly God Society could be destroyed in a day. However, at this moment, Jiao Xiaowen suddenly knocked on the door and entered, bringing with him a slightly horrifying piece of information. Martial Uncle, Senior Ji Yunan went to seek revenge on Old Master Fang. It was true that Ji Yunan had come to seek revenge. Fang Chaoyun wanted to let Ji Yunan go for the time being, but Ji Yunan had no intention of letting him go. If he didn't beat Fang Chaoyun into submission, how could he continue the war in the Holy Nation? What Ji Yunan did was very simple. It was almost the same as what he did in the past. He went to the Terpsichore heaven and destroyed it without any scruples. Then, he left, leaving the furious Fang Chaoyun behind. But unlike before, this time, Ji Yunan didn't return to the Holy Nation. Instead, he stayed near the Terpsichore heaven. How dare you? Fang Chaoyun discovered Ji Yunan's whereabouts immediately and attacked without hesitation. Song Fei told him not to provoke Ji Yunan for the time being, but he didn't tell him not to fight back. A huge kill word appeared in the void and quickly fell toward Ji Yunan. Fang Chaoyun's killing intent was obvious. However, Ji Yunan merely smiled before casually smashing his fist onto the kill character. The huge word was shattered, and Ji Yunan was knocked back, his right hand badly mutilated. In a fair fight, Ji Yunan, who had advanced to level 8, was finally able to compete with Fang Chaoyun. Although he still couldn't fight back, as long as he could stay alive, Ji Yunan had achieved his goal. Ji Yunan revealed a mocking smile, and his figure instantly dived into the spatial crack. He had already gone to another location. Fang Chaoyun's actions were rather hasty. Before he could close the space tunnel, Fang Chaoyun made a prompt decision to rush over. He could tell that the other side was not Ji Yunan's weird astral realm, so he didn't have anything to be afraid of. However, the moment Fang Chaoyun arrived, he heard a cry for help. "Mr. Fang, please help me. This bastard Ji Yunan is coming for the Yuanwu realm." The one who spoke was Cao Yu, the Star Lord of the Yuanwu realm. He was struggling under Ji Yunan's crazy attack. Seeing the arrival of Fang Chaoyun, he felt as if he had seen his savior. Cao Yu of the Yuanwu realm was one of the Star Lords who had previously hindered Ji Yunan's war, but this time he was targeted by Ji Yunan. Fang Chaoyun realized what Ji Yunan wanted to do. He clearly wanted to warn all the Star Lords who opposed him in this way. Cao Yu was the weakest among the realm-level Star Lords, not much better than Red, but he was a realm-level Star Lord after all. If he suffered heavy losses under Ji Yunan's rampage, who would dare to participate in the battle against Ji Yunan? All these thoughts flashed in Fang Chaoyun's mind. Without hesitation, he wrote 9 big words in a row. Ji Yunan roared with laughter instead, and he left Cao Yu and ran without saying a word, descending towards Cao Yu's lair below. The 9 big words naturally fell, and then they were forcefully destroyed by Ji Yunan one by one. The terrifying shockwave that erupted almost destroyed half of Cao Yu's lair. Cao Yu looked like he wanted to cry. "Mr. Fang, this," Fang Chaoyun's expression was also ugly. Not long ago, he could easily take down the other party, forcing the other party to escape into the Star Realm. However, he could not do anything to him now. At the end of the day, the literary Dao that he was proficient in was not the killing Dao. It was very difficult to kill Ji Yunan. However, this did not mean that Fang Chaoyun had no other way. He said in a deep voice, "Don't worry." Fang Chaoyun started writing quickly, and the word suppress appeared under his pen. "As long as we can suppress this person, this old man is confident." Next, Black Dragon World. After Ji Yunan destroyed Cao Yu's lair, he waved his hand unhurriedly and said, "Old cow, after I teach them a lesson, I will come to you again." Div class equals other_links text download address phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 464. Chapter 425. Ji Yunan always did what he said. Dragon. Altar. Book. Longtan show. Because of Fang Chaoyun's interference, there was no time to cause more damage to Cao Yu's Yuanwu realm, but Ji Yunan could go find the next victim. In the Black Dragon world, the Star Lord's true form was a large black dragon, but he usually liked to transform into a human and wore a black dragon robe. When Ji Yunan descended, this black dragon was sitting majestically on the dragon throne, looking down at the humans and dragons under his command. A white-haired old man stood below, bowing and reporting, "Your Majesty, this year." A black light suddenly lit up the sky, and a terrifying pressure descended from the sky, directly smashing onto the top of the palace. The old man in front of the black dragon, along with all the officials below him, were completely annihilated by this attack, and the palace completely collapsed. "Who?" The black dragon instantly transformed into his true form, and his angry roar reached the sky, almost piercing through the clouds. However, a fist mercilessly smashed into his head from the void. This black dragon, who had always been known for his powerful physical body, had his flesh split open by this punch. The black dragon, whose head had been smashed open, instantly let out a series of miserable cries. Only then did he realize who it was. "Your Excellency Ji Yunan, please stop." The black dragon shouted loudly, and his figure quickly shrunk, so that the area of his body that was hit would be smaller. Of course, Ji Yunan did not pay attention to him. This kind of world-level Star Lord, even if he was on his own astral realm and had the power of the astral realm, was not a match for Ji Yunan. A few more punches landed, and the dragon-robed man, who was transformed from the black dragon, was already crazily vomiting blood. If not for his powerful body as a dragon, he would probably have died from these punches. Fang Chaoyun finally arrived, but Ji Yunan would not waste time with him, and started to run without another word, not even glancing at the black dragon who was already on the verge of death. Cao Yu also sneakily followed. He was an old friend of the black dragon, and seeing the situation, he hurriedly ran over. Seeing Cao Yu appear, Ji Yunan could not help but be amused. You still have the time to care about others? Looks like the Yuanwu realm is not troubled enough. After saying this, he suddenly changed his direction and returned to the Yuanwu realm. No, no. Cao Yu's face turned green. He really wanted to raise his hand and give himself a slap. Why did he join in the fun? However, Ji Yunan had always been a man of his word. Even though Fang Chaoyun had returned with him, he still endured Fang Chaoyun's attacks and forcefully smashed the Yuanwu realm into pieces before leaving unhurriedly. Therefore, in just a few hours, Ji Yunan had visited all of the dozen or so Star Lords who had stopped him from invading the cosmic realm and killed a large number of God's servants. Among them, there were thorns like Cao Yu from the Yuanwu realm who had been repeatedly visited by him. It could definitely be said that corpses were strewn all over the place, and blood flowed like rivers. During this period of time, Fang Chaoyun, a rank 10 Star Lord, could only follow behind Ji Yunan and eat his dust. He could not pose any threat to him at all. Having reached the 8th level, Ji Yunan's speed had reached an unparalleled level. The power of laws could not restrict him at all. It was not that Fang Chaoyun had not thought of ambushing him. He had calculated Ji Yunan's route several times, and set up the suppress formation in advance, waiting for Ji Yunan to come knocking. But Ji Yunan was not restricted by him at all. The 99 suppress formations that old Mr. Fang had painstakingly written could only block Ji Yunan for an instant, and was easily broken by his demon god body. Afterwards, Fang Chaoyun tried to pursue and attack fiercely, not giving Ji Yunan any chance to catch his breath. He tried to attack like a storm, so that Ji Yunan could not recover in time. Unfortunately, just as he was about to succeed, Ji Yunan directly turned around and returned to the Divine Kingdom. An hour later, he ran back in high spirits. Old Mr. Fang could only stare outside with red eyes. Having already suffered once in Ji Yunan's Divine Kingdom, he did not dare to go in again. All in all, the fast that Ji Yunan had personally participated in was an eye-opener for the entire heavenly worlds. Usually, they would not see so many Star Lords fighting each other. But what most people saw was the terrifying destructive power of Ji Yunan, the devil incarnate. More than 10 astral realms were smashed, looted, and even the Star Lords themselves were nowhere to be found. They did not dare to stay in the astral realms and court death. Meanwhile, Ji Yunan was not injured at all. Fang Chaoyun, the 10th level Star Lord, had completely become the background. His crazy pursuit had made Ji Yunan famous. Even such a great Star Lord could not do anything to him. Song Fei was afraid of old man Zi Luo and was unwilling to take the lead in these 10 years. Therefore, no one below the Dao integration could stop Ji Yunan. Interestingly, Ji Yunan's actions had offset some of the impact of Fang Chaoyun's application to join the Heavenly Deity Society. While Song Fei had pointed out the Heavenly Deity Society's position, Ji Yunan's undefeated reputation had attracted a group of Star Lords to join. These people might not be very loyal to the Heavenly Deity Society, but as long as the Heavenly Deity Society did not show any signs of decline, they were happy to become the cornerstone of the organization. A false prosperity was still prosperity. As long as the core was not damaged, the false could also become real. The battle between the 10 astral realm Star Lords had made Ji Yunan famous in the heavenly worlds again. Some people had even said that he was the #1 person below the Dao integration realm. Although Ji Yunan was only a celestial level Star Lord, he could fight with a great Star Lord like Fang Chaoyun and even dare to cause trouble in pure grace heaven. On the other hand, Fang Chaoyun did not even dare to let out a fart. Was this not enough to show who was stronger and who was weaker? With this comparison, more and more people began to participate in the discussion about Ji Yunan's strength. In the current heavenly worlds, there were only a few people who were at the same level as Fang Chaoyun and Shui Ren. Red Candle Heaven's Green Lamp Fairy, who was the last to reach the Tao among the younger generation, was recognized as the weakest. She was even weaker than Fang Chaoyun. Of course, Shui Ren would not make an enemy of Ji Yunan. Because of the characteristics of his nomological laws, Sect Master Luo of the Three Corpses Heaven was naturally at a disadvantage against a cultivator with a strong body like Ji Yunan. Therefore, he was also considered to be weaker than Ji Yunan. Only the Tao-severing Heavenly King, Wang Li, had fought with Shui Ren for a short time when he had faked the Tao integration realm. In that battle, the two of them had exchanged blows with their saber and sword, and the bystanders had not even been able to understand what had happened. They had not even been able to estimate their realms and could only be described as unfathomable. But it was also because of this that the debate about who was stronger between Wang Li and Ji Yunan, to be more precise, whether Ji Yunan could escape from Wang Li's hands, fell into endless arguments. Ji Yunan did not say anything about this. He even did not allow any Star Lord to set foot in his Tao integration realm, no name change realm. He would kill anyone who came. In the end, it was Wang Li who personally came forward to express his stance that stopped the ferment of this public opinion. I can't kill him in a head-on fight. When this comment spread, the saying that Ji Yunan was invincible below the Tao integration realm finally spread. LTPGT div class equals other underscore links text download address mobile phone reading. For convenience of reading next time, you can bookmark to record this text, chapter 465. Chapter 426. No matter what others said, Ji Yunan was not interested in it. He was busy organizing a new kingdom war. Dragon Audiobook Network. After advancing to level 8, many new buildings began to appear. He had to first pick out the more useful ones and sort out their uses and costs so that the cabinet could analyze them. At the same time, the cabinet also had to analyze the average strength of the astral realms, the difficulty of attacking them, the expected returns, and so on. Only by considering all the information could Ji Yunan choose the most suitable astral realm to attack. Of course, considering that there were fewer and fewer targets to choose from, he might be able to guess which one was the most suitable if he eliminated the obviously unsuitable ones. In the end, there was only one name left in the report from the cabinet: Tao Sect Realm. Tao Lord Wu Tian's Tao Sect Realm had a conflict with Ji Yunan before. It was also the first target that Ji Yunan had displayed his terrifying power. Later, Tao Lord Wu Tian realized that he could not do anything to Ji Yunan. In order to avoid further losses, he could only choose to admit defeat and apologize. But the grudge between the two sides did not end there. Wu Tian's apology was more like hanging up a no-fight sign. If there was a good opportunity to attack, neither side would let it go. And now, the time was ripe. Now that God Kingdom had advanced to realm level, Ji Yunan's own power was enough to contend against Wu Tian's power in the Tao Sect realm. Therefore, the conditions to invade the Tao Sect realm were met. More importantly, the Tao Sect realm and Ji Yunan had a grudge. This was the core reason why the cabinet made such a decision. Of course, it was not as simple as venting their anger. Both sides had a grudge, which meant that they had a reason to attack. The previous small skirmishes were one thing, but attacking a world-level plane and not having the right to do so was a completely different matter. For Ji Yunan to invade other astral realms, if he attacked enemies every time, then he would at most gain a reputation for being vengeful. It was not a big deal. But if he attacked other astral realms for no reason, it was easy for everyone to be in danger. In the end, it would lead to a collective resistance against Ji Yunan. If everyone was worried about being attacked by Ji Yunan, then there was no point in using the astral realms to threaten him. Ji Yunan might not care about this kind of thing, but the cabinet would definitely do it to perfection. Tao Sect realm? Then let it be. Ji Yunan had no objections to this and quickly adopted the cabinet's proposal. Then, he began to deploy the divine servant army. As for Tao Lord Wu Tian himself, he immediately began his journey to the Daoist sect world and began his journey of destruction. Tao Lord Wu Tian had no choice but to run for his life. In fact, in a very short period of time, Tao Lord Wu Tian had used up more than half of his astral energy. By the time the battle began, he would probably be eating dirt. However, what Ji Yunan did not expect was that when the war between the divine kingdoms was in the tense preparation stage, an uninvited guest suddenly came to his door. "You really didn't die?" Sylvia glared at Ji Yunan and questioned, "Since you're fine, why didn't you come out and explain everything?" "Say what?" Ji Yunan didn't feel ashamed at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Isn't it clear who killed him? What else do you need me to prove?" Sylvia clenched her fists tightly and pursed her lips. No one knew what she was thinking. She had listened to Daoist Spirit Sun's suggestion and hurried over from the Pantheon world to see how Ji Yunan was doing. She didn't expect to hear news of Ji Yunan the moment she arrived. Given how popular Ji Yunan was, there was no need for her to inquire about him at all. The news came to her on its own. "Luke and Clive, you killed them, didn't you?" The shadow goddess squeezed the words out from between her teeth. Ji Yunan sat high up on his throne and looked calmly at Sylvia, who was standing below him. He didn't say a word. The evil god's temple fell into a strange silence. Sylvia suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. At that moment, Ji Yunan suddenly stood up. "Since you knew, why did you dare come here?" Ji Yunan's voice was very calm, but it seemed to carry a hint of regret. In the next moment, shadow tentacles burrowed out of the ceiling of the evil god's temple and instantly wrapped around Sylvia's limbs, dragging her into the air. Caught off guard, Sylvia was quickly dragged into the air. A look of terror appeared on her face. She wanted to transform into a shadow and escape, but found that all her laws were being suppressed. They were laws of the same origin, and with Ji Yunan in his divine kingdom, Sylvia naturally had no ability to resist. She thought that as long as she kept her guard up, the shadow could help her escape. She didn't expect that Ji Yunan had already advanced to the 8th level. If it had been before he had advanced, Ji Yunan wouldn't have been able to keep her here unless he was in close combat. "Let me go." Sylvia's voice came to an abrupt halt, as the shadow had already covered her mouth. The shadow goddess was firmly fixed to the ceiling, her entire body covered in pitch-black shadows. From the outside, it was impossible to tell what was going on. Ji Yunan could not help but laugh as he shook his head. Of course, it was impossible to kill Sylvia. If he did, her brother Austin would definitely notice. The wrath of the god of light and justice was not easy to bear, even if he hid in the Pantheon world. However, the chances of Sylvia being discovered would be much lower if he only trapped her here for a few years. After all, to a god, it would only take the blink of an eye. Sylvia was very regretful now, but she was also very calm. As a god who had lived for tens of thousands of years, it wasn't like she hadn't experienced life and death. Hence, she knew that she had to calm down in times like this. It was as if she was trapped in the boundless shadows. She could neither move nor speak, but she could still hear what was going on outside. She heard someone walk into the hall and report to Ji Yunan, but the content was about to start a war in the Divine Kingdom. Divine Kingdom. Sylvia could finally confirm that Ji Yunan was indeed from the Pantheon world. Otherwise, they wouldn't have called him that internally. However, there were some things that didn't make sense. Since Ji Yunan had established a divine kingdom and not an astral plane, why didn't he need the power of faith? Could it be that after he reincarnated into the Pantheon world, he had established an astral plane and not a divine kingdom? Why would he make a special trip to the Pantheon world to kill both Luke and Cliff? Sylvia, who was unable to move, was still thinking. Questions surfaced in her mind one after another. As the god who had the deepest understanding of Ji Yunan, when she put all this information together, a terrifying thought appeared in Sylvia's mind. That was an ancient legend that had been passed down before the First War of the Gods. If not for her brother mentioning it by chance, Sylvia might not even have known about it. However, now that she thought about it, Ji Yunan seemed to be very similar to the existence of that legend. Sylvia, who felt that she had discovered an earth-shattering secret, suddenly felt a sense of urgency in her heart. No, I must leave this place. Div class equals other_links text download address phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 466. Chapter 427. Even in the current Pantheon world, not many people knew about the legends of the evil gods. Dragon Altar Booknet. In fact, such legends were not uncommon in the ancient times of the Pantheon world. There were all sorts of creatures that were enemies of the gods or even the entire human race, and had a strong tendency to self-destruct. However, had anyone really seen such an existence before? The answer was no. Actually, it did not make much sense. Whether it was the Pantheon world or the Pantheon world, the development path of the gods and astral lords was essentially the same. They strengthened themselves by managing the plane, and finally reached the stage of unification. They combined themselves with the laws of the great world, and from then on, existed eternally with the world. If that was the case, how could there be living beings in this world who took on the responsibility of killing the gods? What was the purpose of their existence? What benefits would they gain from killing the gods? Living beings were always motivated by benefits. In this world, there had never been anyone who benefited from killing other gods. However, Ji-Yunan's appearance made Sylvia realize that such a person might really exist. Sylvia had seen with her own eyes how Ji-Yunan had found and killed the mirror deity from an unimaginable place, and then specifically went to kill Luke and Clive. It seemed like every time he killed a god, his power would increase. As the scenes of the past flashed through her mind, Sylvia's guess became even more certain. Ji-Yunan must be some kind of ancient evil creature that had taken on a human form after coming to the Pantheon world for some reason. Even Sylvia had never seen such a peculiar existence before. She suddenly felt as if something was gripping her heart, and a sense of duty to save the world rose within her. Indeed, she had to save the world, because the legendary evil creatures all took on the responsibility of destroying the world. Escape, I have to think of a way to escape. Sylvia forced herself to calm down. Even though most of her senses were sealed, she could still hear the voices outside. The reports she heard never stopped, and it seemed that many people had already entered and exited. The content of their conversation with Ji-Yunan also revolved around the upcoming war in the Kingdom of God. Sylvia had not heard of the term Divine Kingdom War for a long time. This was because in the world of gods, most of the gods would not easily start a war. They were more inclined to fight individually. Unlike the celestial lords of the myriad heavens, as long as they defeated other celestial lords, they could plunder resources from other celestial lords' territories, strengthen their reputation, and attract more experts to join them. When the gods of the Pantheon world started a war, it was basically for the sake of doctrine. There was almost no real benefit to be gained. Believers could not be stolen, they could only be cultivated. Sylvia endured the discomfort of not being able to sense the outside world and listened carefully to the conversation between Ji-Yunan and his subordinates. The more she listened, the more shocked she became. Unlike the war she knew, Ji-Yunan's purpose in sending out the army seemed to be completely unconcerned about resources and territory. It was purely to kill. All the arrangements were made to increase the efficiency of killing, and the targets of the hunt ranged from mortals to cultivators below the level of gods. Sylvia memorized this detail and tried her best to empty her mind as she waited for an opportunity to escape. After an unknown period of time, she sensed that it had been quiet outside for a long time. Ji-Yunan seemed to have left a long time ago. Thus, the shadow goddess began to probe carefully, mobilizing the divine power in her body bit by bit, as if trying to break through the external restraints. Unfortunately, it was also shadow power outside. The moment her divine power left her body, it was completely assimilated. Instead, it made the power even stronger. Damn it! Sylvia had never hated shadows so much. If not for the fact that the other party also controlled the law of shadows, it would have been impossible for others to trap her like this. As a goddess who controlled shadows, she was confident that she could break free from the restraints under any circumstances. Shadows could not be restrained, unless the other party was also a shadow. If it had been the Sylvia of the past, she might have already given up hope and prayed that her brother would quickly discover her disappearance and find her. However, now that she was carrying the hopes of the entire world, driven by the heavy sense of duty in her heart, she did not have any thoughts of giving up. I must get out. The shadow goddess was determined. She gave up on the thought of escaping with shadow power, and actually began to use her divine body to clash with the law of shadows. Other than a freak like Ji-Yunan, the divine body of an ordinary god was not considered powerful, but it was not weak either. The divine body was inherently stronger than the law of shadows, but it was difficult to recover, so very few gods would use it in battle. However, Sylvia could not care so much at this point. The shadow power invaded her body, causing Sylvia to feel a faint prickling pain. However, she endured it, feeling a little excited. This was because she could clearly feel that the law of shadows restraining her had indeed been worn away a little. Even if it was just a small amount, the law of shadows that left Ji Yunan would not be replenished. As long as she could persist, she would be able to break free sooner or later. Persevere. Sylvia encouraged herself. She began to try again and again, and when her divine body was severely damaged, she would stop to rest for a while. Very soon, she began the repetitive process of dripping water through a rock again. Only when she heard a series of footsteps did she hurriedly stop, afraid that Ji Yunan would notice what she was doing. However, it was completely necessary for her to be cautious, because Ji Yunan's voice was soon heard. Our destination is the Dao sect realm. Let's go. Dao Lord Wu Tian of the Dao sect realm had been tormented by Ji Yunan recently. He did not expect that Ji Yunan would target the Dao sect realm. He thought that it was because of the grudges from back then, and now that Ji Yunan had become a realm-level Star Lord, he would come back to seek revenge. Back then, he could not do anything to Ji Yunan, so he could only endure it now. He could not turn around and go to Ji Yunan's home. What a joke. Even Fang Chaoyun had suffered in Ji Yunan's home. Now, all the Star Lords who had a grudge against Ji Yunan all viewed it as a dangerous place. Therefore, even when groups of God servants descended from the Divine Kingdom and landed in various parts of the Dao sect realm, Dao Lord Wu Tian was still in a daze. He had clearly said that it was just to vent his anger. How did it turn into an all-out war? Within the Divine Kingdom, Yang Xiaoxiao transformed into a figure and stood beside Ji Yunan. Do you need me to get rid of that Madam Sylvia in the Divine Kingdom? Sylvia probably did not expect that everything she did in the shadows was actually under Yang Xiaoxiao's watch. No need. Ji Yunan waved his hand. If she wanted to escape like this, the monkeys would have run out of the Five Fingers Mountain. Div class equals other_links text download address, mobile reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time to record it. Chapter 467, Death. Chapter 428. The Dao sect world was done. Dragon Audiobook Network. The onlookers, who had personally witnessed Ji Yunan's army pressing down on the border, were clearly aware of this. The Dao sect world would likely no longer have any ability to resist. Even though Ji Yunan's army had been surrounded by 10 planet masters and suffered a lot of losses, their overall power was not as great as before. But they could not stop the player army from taking shape. With the addition of Xie Yun and Liang Ruxin, Divine Nation's high-end combat power wasn't inferior to any of the realm-level realms. The other 7 player army members were quickly growing, too. And Tiansheng was the most outstanding of them all. This young man, who was walking the path of a bandit, had a growth curve similar to Xie Yun's. Because of the special nature of his path, he would be more flexible in the future. Pay-to-win experts were shockingly strong at the beginning, but when they reached level 6 or 7, the amount of gold they needed to level up would reach a level that would make people despair. The bandit path did not have such a problem. When the level was higher, the targets they robbed would level up. No matter what, from the planet masters to the breakworld powers, and then to the normal armies, the Dao sect world was being crushed. There was no hope of a comeback. Due to Ji Yunan's previous action, none of the Star Masters, including Fang Chaoyun, dared to lend a hand. The same was true for Dao Lord Wu Tian's friends. Anyone who helped out at a time like this would be the next to suffer. Ji Yunan was like a giant B***starred. He could go to other people's houses and cause trouble, but no one dared to come and die. Of course, it wasn't that there weren't any hotheads. In this world, there would always be 1 or 2 people who prioritized righteousness. Old friend Wu Tian, I am here to help you. With a loud shout, a big man with 2 axes appeared. He came to the Dao sect world. Dao Lord Wu Tian was like rain after a long drought. To be able to get a helping hand at a time like this was very touching. He also knew that this big man with 2 axes was just a young planet master who had just obtained an astral world. He could not fight Ji Yunan. Instead of sending him to die, it was better to deal with Ji Yunan's people. If a planet master intervened, it would buy him a lot of time. Thinking of that, Tao Lord Wu Tian quickly shouted, "Don't come, go." Bang! He spoke very quickly, but Ji Yunan's movements were faster than him. Without thinking, Ji Yunan punched the back of the dual-axe man's head, and his body slowly fell down. Evil creature! Tao Lord Wu Tian couldn't help but let out an enraged roar, but Ji Yunan just turned and sent another fist smashing towards him. This time, Tao Lord Wu Tian didn't even have the slightest bit of temper left in him. Strictly speaking, Tao Lord Wu Tian of the Tao sect world was no weaker than an ordinary 10th stage expert. However, the astral plane only gave him the enhancement of the nomological laws, and it could not deal fatal damage to Ji Yunan. Hence, the situation was stalled by him. Once the power of the astral plane was depleted, Tao Lord Wu Tian's defeat would be foreseeable. Besides, Ji Yunan's goal in this battle wasn't to kill Wu Tian anyway. Without the intervention of a foreign Star Lord, the native cultivators of the Tao sect realm were forced to retreat. No one could resist Ji Yunan's army. This was especially true for Xie Yun, Lan Sai, and the others. All of them were the strongest below the Star Lord level, and almost no one was a match for them. The Divine Servant Army's slaughter speed was extremely fast. In just a day, they had cleansed the entire Tao sect realm. At this time, the outcome of the battle between Ji Yunan and Wu Tian had yet to be decided. In truth, there was no need to decide the outcome. If Wu Tian couldn't kill Ji Yunan from the start, then he was doomed to lose. At this time, Tao Lord Wu Tian was indeed in a weakened state. His attacks seemed to be mechanical, and he no longer had the vigor of a day ago. Anyone who had been entangled with Ji Yunan for a day and a night and had to watch their astral plane being destroyed would probably be in the same state as Tao Lord Wu Tian. This was a complete mental devastation. What was even more frightening was that Ji Yunan didn't seem to have changed at all. It was as if the previous battle hadn't affected him at all. Tens of thousands of years of hard work had been destroyed, and Tao Lord Wu Tian's mind was in a trance. In a moment of carelessness, Ji Yunan punched him in the stomach and sent him flying. Of course, Ji Yunan wasn't going to be polite. Seeing that his opponent wasn't in a good state, he was going to beat him while he was down. However, right at this moment, a beam of clear light hovered in front of Ji Yunan, slowly forming a human figure. This person was a young man with delicate features and wore a black Daoist robe. He looked quite similar to Daoist Qin Ning. Disciple of Azure Light Cave's sect master, Fang Keming, greets senior Ji Yunan. The young man called himself Fang Keming was very humble and addressed Lin Fan as senior. Ji Yunan pulled back at the right time. The young man in front of him was only around the 5th stage, but he represented someone, so Ji Yunan had to give him face. Daoist Fang Keming of Azure Void Heaven was the last disciple of Tao Venerate Fish Lotus. He had cultivated for less than 100 years but had already become a Star Lord. Whether it was his potential or status, he wasn't someone Qin Ning could compare with. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a problem for him to call Ji Yunan senior. It was rare for Ji Yunan to meet a cultivator younger than him. Did Fish Lotus ask you to come? Ji Yunan didn't have any intention of chatting with a junior and directly asked. Fang Keming bowed. The sect master said that the Tao sect world and my Azure Void Heaven share the same origin. I ask that senior show mercy. That's fine. This time, Ji Yunan seemed especially easy to talk to. He said without hesitation, I'll return Wu Tian to you. My people will withdraw today. The Tao sect world had been cleansed and they had collected almost all the points they could. There was no benefit in killing Wu Tian. Fang Keming quickly revealed a look of gratitude. He protected Tao Monarch Wu Tian behind him and bowed again. Tao Monarch Wu Tian followed behind Fang Keming. He managed to recover some of his energy. After all, he was a great Star Lord who had experienced great storms. Although the Tao sect world had been cleansed, its foundation hadn't been destroyed. Ji Yunan hadn't attacked its source. Because of this, Tao Monarch Wu Tian felt that Lin Fan wanted to vent his anger. It wasn't that Lin Fan wanted to kill him. It was just that Lin Fan wanted to vent his anger. Wu Tian took a deep breath. He looked at his broken Tao sect world one last time before helplessly following Fang Keming to the Azure Void Heaven. He's going to return to the Dongshu Heaven. Congratulations. Ji Nan revealed a smile as he spoke. The rebuilding of the Dao sect world was not something that could be done overnight. Wu Tian's willingness to follow Fang Keming back represented his attitude. This loser of the past, after holding on for so many years, finally had to lower his head to the azure void heaven. Red Tail was still the commander of the Divine Kingdom War. She came to Ji Nan's side and said, "Then it won't be good to come next time." "Lord, who should we attack next?" Ji Nan glanced at her and couldn't help but chuckle. "Why have you become belligerent?" Without waiting for Red Tail to reply, he shook his head. "The next wave is going to be big. Div class equals other _ links text download address phone reading to make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time." Chapter 468, War. Chapter 429. After the battle in the Path Sect realm ended, the first thing Ji Nan did was take stock of his losses and gains. The results were somewhat out of his expectations. Dragon Altar Booknet, perhaps it was because Ji Nan's previous actions had frightened many of the Starlords. Until the end of the battle, not many dared to intervene. This also resulted in very few losses among the divine attendants. The death rate among the divine envoys was 0, and only a few were slightly injured. However, the gains this time were far greater than any of the previous battles. Even compared to conquering the astral realm, the points gained were a lot more. After all, the astral realm was the weakest among the realm-level realms. Moreover, due to the vastness of the astral realm and the interference of other Starlords, the battle was not fully completed. Naturally, the points gained would not be maximized. Calming himself down, Ji Nan began to think about his next move. Based on the current situation, choosing the one-step to heaven method and directly leaping to the 10th level was a more reliable plan. After causing such a ruckus in the Pantheon world, it would not be appropriate for him to appear in public again unless he was prepared to be questioned and exposed in front of others. That way, rather than making 2 trips to the Pantheon world to advance to the 9th and 10th level, it would be better to settle it in one go. In terms of points, Ji Nan did a rough calculation. If he followed the simplest route of managing his divine kingdom and chose buildings with the goal of leveling up, the 10th level was actually right in front of him. At most, he would need another realm like the Half-Path Sect realm to reach the required points. In the later stages of the Divine Kingdom after the first-class advancement, there were often players who were unable to extricate themselves from it. This was because from the 8th level onwards, there were simply too many buildings for players to choose from. They each had their own unique uses. Be it in terms of appearance or practicality, they were all worth building. Some players even managed their divine kingdoms like an iron bucket. Even a Lord-level powerhouse would not be able to easily invade. To the game officials, a large number of buildings undoubtedly satisfied some of the players who liked to manage, and at the same time, extended the lifespan of the game. However, to a professional player like Ji Nan who pursued efficiency, a large number of buildings were of no use. Instead, choosing the cheapest building to fulfill the requirements for leveling up was the most important thing. But even so, the points efficiency of the All Heavens is really high. Even Ji Nan couldn't help but sigh. According to the corresponding ranks, the Dao sect world was only a rank 8 divine kingdom, but the points they could obtain were even more than a rank 9 divine kingdom. At the end of the day, the source of points in the Pantheon world mainly came from fanatics. Harvesting them, be it in terms of efficiency or quantity, was far inferior to directly hunting powerhouses. The gap in points wasn't too big, and it could even be said that because of the characteristics of the heavenly worlds, it wasn't too difficult to gather enough points, but there was no possibility of cheating in terms of sin value. In order to advance to the 10th level, he would have to kill at least 3 10th level gods. Of course, he could also choose to use low-level gods to make up the numbers, but the number of gods required would be several times greater. Looks like this is the only way. Ji Nan sat calmly in the evil divine palace, his gaze landing on the horizon. What is this? Red Tail looked at the stack of documents in front of him in surprise. She saw in the documents that there was a way to train subordinates. It was a method to train a god personality. In simple terms, it used a god personality as the raw material and a normal person as the training medium. It was easy to train a subordinate that was at least break world. Red Tail knew very well that what she said was definitely not false information. She had seen an example right in front of her. Lan Sai had been trained using a similar method. The most important thing was that there was only one Lan Sai, and the training method that Ji Yunan had given him meant that the god personality could be used repeatedly. As long as the subordinate was trained to a satisfactory level, the god personality could be taken out. It was not like Lan Sai had become Ji Yunan's god messenger. This training method only used the noble rules inside the god personality. Of course, the more the god personality was used, the less rules there would be left inside. However, in this kind of semifusion state, it wouldn't be much of a problem for a godhead to be used more than 10 times. I know that the birth of a break-world elite is, in some ways, harder than a legendary elite. Ji Yunan smiled and said, the leveling up path is smoother, and you don't need to understand the space rules. So, many Star Masters, especially young Star Masters, have a high demand for break-world elites. The number of break-world elites in an astral world was a representation of the Star Master's power. It was a shame that break-world elites could not be trained just because they wanted to. It required a lot of understanding and talent. Now, Ji Yunan had a training plan that had a high success rate in front of Red Tail. After following Ji Yunan for so many years, Red Tail actually had a good understanding of his style. Therefore, as soon as he saw the information, he already knew what Ji Yunan wanted to do. Are you planning on releasing this information? Yes. Ji Yunan nodded and smiled. It cannot be released to the public. It has to be leaked secretly. It was not like Red Tail had never done something like this before, so it was not difficult for him to get the information to spread among the young Star-Lord circle. He quickly nodded in agreement. She was much more experienced now. Back then, she could see where the real difficulty lay in this information. But obtaining a god's personality is difficult, right? Red Tail said carefully. Many Star Masters knew about the world of gods, but the two sides had always been at peace. To put it bluntly, there was no conflict of interest. Although a god's personality was good, the benefits were not worth the effort. Ji Yunan smiled and took out another document from the drawer. This one can be released to the public. Red Tail quickly took the document. When she saw the title, she could not look away. On it was written, Weak God Hunting Manual. Geng Chengyun was a Star Master who had just been promoted. He had yet to take charge of a world. He had a suitable target in the inner world, but because he was not strong enough, he did not rush to try. Instead, he chose to settle down first. On this day, because he had finished a round of retreat, he planned to go out and relax. He wanted to adjust his mood, but he received a letter from an old friend. It's urgent. Come to Nine Isles World quickly. The sender was Geng Chengyun's old friend, Nine Isles World Star Master, Mai Cheng. Geng Chengyun, who was familiar with his old friend's style, was slightly surprised. He knew that Mai Cheng would not send him such a letter if it was not urgent. He hurried to Nine Isles World. Mai Cheng had become a Star Master 2,000 years earlier than him. They were of the same generation, and he had always taken care of him. Now that Mai Cheng had sent an urgent letter, Geng Chengyun was determined to help his old friend no matter what. However, when he arrived at Nine Isles World, he found that it was not what he had imagined. Brother Geng, you're here? Come quickly, we're waiting for you. Mai Cheng said excitedly as he sensed Geng Chengyun's arrival. Geng Chengyun was surprised to find that there were already 4 Star Masters in the small Nine Isles world, not including himself. Apart from Mai Cheng himself, he recognized 2 of the 3. They were both young Star-Lords who were on a similar level as himself. Brother Mai, you guys are. Mai Cheng patted Geng Chengyun's shoulder and smiled. Brother, here's our chance. Netdiv class equals other_links, text download address, phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this time. Chapter 469 of the War. Chapter 430. Geng Chengyun looked at Mai Cheng inexplicably, not understanding what he was talking about. Dragon? Altar? Book? A few people beside him saw this and could not help but show friendly smiles. Seeing this, the people next to him could not help but show a friendly smile. One of them also knew Geng Chengyun and said with a smile, Old Geng, have you just come out of seclusion? You haven't even heard of this? Gang Chengyun nodded and said, to tell you the truth, I did just come out of seclusion. No wonder. My Cheng looked enlightened and handed a document to Gang Chengyun. Brother, take a look at this. Gang Chengyun took it and looked at it. On the first page of the information, there was a line of large words, Weak Gods Hunting Manual. Gang Chengyun naturally knew about the existence of the Pantheon world and the gods, so when he saw this name, he was shocked. Gods were on the same level as the master of the Pantheon. Someone actually dared to say that they could kill a god. A look of disdain flashed in Gang Chengyun's eyes. He did not want to pay attention to such nonsense, but considering that it was my Cheng who gave him the information, he patiently flipped it open. On the title page, Gang Chengyun saw this sentence, all methods in this manual are only used against weak gods below level 7. Remember to choose the right target when using them. Spoken as if it's true. Gang Chengyun secretly curled his lips, but then he was shocked by the long table of contents on the next page. The definition of weak gods, the commonplaces of weak gods, how to lure weak gods to appear, the common areas of weak gods' activities. Gang Chengyun even saw something even more terrifying at the end of the manual. Example demonstration, detailed steps to capture and kill the level 6 god, Nofeti, the god of smoke. Gang Chengyun felt his heartbeat quicken. He quickly flipped to the end of the book. Sure enough, there were detailed instructions on how to kill Nofeti. This was a level 6 god with a god kingdom. He quickly looked up at my Cheng and said, this Nofeti, dead. My Cheng said casually, the way he died was exactly as described in the manual. His divinity was also dug out. Gang Chengyun only felt a boom in his head, as if something in his heart had shattered. He knew that it was a kind of superiority unique to a Star Lord. My Cheng saw his expression and could not help but smile. Don't be nervous. This handbook is completely targeted at the gods. It has no effect on us. As my Cheng and the others narrated, Gang Chengyun finally understood what had happened in the All Heavens while he was in seclusion. First, there was a strange piece of information about using God's personality to cultivate break-world beings. It started to spread among the Star Lords. Back then, not many people thought it was a big deal. After all, a god's personality was not some cabbage. It was more difficult to get it than it was to raise a break-world. It was something of little value. Suddenly, this hunting manual appeared out of nowhere. It was no longer sneaky. It was published in the open for all Star Lords and Break World to read. I can't believe there's such a method. Gang Chengyun muttered after reading the Godhead cultivation method. Although he had not reached the stage of managing an astral world, he lacked world break-takers. That was a situation every Star Master faced. If he had a break world subordinate, it would save him a lot of energy. Star Lords like my Cheng needed the help of break world beings. They just needed to wave their flags and attract break-world beings from everywhere to stay in their astral world. A break-world being raised by one's own hands was more reassuring than an outsider. Gang Chengyun did not need to think too much. He understood the value of the two pieces of information. His gaze began to heat up as he looked around. According to the handbook, a team that hunted god lords should have 5 people. That number guaranteed a high success rate. There would not be too many people, and it would not be difficult to distribute the spoils. It was the most cost-effective configuration. Gang Chengyun thought that even if the 5 of them could only get one god's personality, the 5 of them could take turns using it. They just needed to find a small place with a slow time flow. It would not take long to raise a break-world being. They could quickly squeeze out the value of a god's personality. Seeing Gang Chengyun's eyes change, my Cheng did not need to ask. He understood his attitude. So, he said, let's not waste time. If Brother Gang wants to participate in this, why don't we go now? You want to go now? I want to go back and prepare something. Gang Chengyun was shocked. He did not expect my Cheng to be in such a hurry. He had come out to relax, but he had not prepared anything suitable for fighting. Xie Yu, who was next to him, said, Old Gang, are you stupid? This hunting manual is public, and it won't be long before the Pantheon finds out as well. There's no time for us to wait. Gang Chengyun realized he had been confused by the news. He had not thought of this. He quickly said, "Let's not waste time. Let's go." This was really urgent. Using righteousness to drive people could only last for a while. Using benefits to drive people could last for a long time. Ji Nan did not do anything. He only released 2 pieces of information, and the whole world was in a mess. Most of the Star Lords were mobilized. The Star Lords could not help but be enthusiastic. After all, one god's personality represented at least 10 breakworld beings. They could also choose who they wanted. Even the Star Lords had never seen something so good. The young Star Lords, who were still in the beginning stages of the astral world, were very grateful to the person who released the information. It was a timely reign. So, the number of breakworld beings in the world reached an all-time high. In just half a month, the Star Lords all had a breakworld being their follower. The status of wild breakworld beings plummeted. Because of Ji Nan's actions, the solidification of the hierarchy in the world became much more serious. The weaker gods in the world of God were also unlucky. Wild breakworld beings had a lower status, but these gods had lost their lives. The sudden death of so many gods finally caught the attention of the higher-ups in the world of God. For the first time, the 12 main gods sat together to try to find the source. There should have been 13, but now there was Lorenza. But when the results came out, they could only look at each other speechlessly. The main gods knew about the world of God, so they knew that when the god's personality was linked to the Star Lord's astral world, the conflict between the two was irreconcilable. The god of time Fan Lun thought about it and said, "Negotiate with the other side. Ask their fusing masters to ban the Star Lords from coming here privately. It's useless." The Lady of Darkness Daisy sighed. "Even if there is a ban, there will be people who will take the risk." The beast god put the heavy sword on the table and looked around. "Everyone, I think we should prepare for war." The main gods did not answer. They agreed with his words. No matter how strong the ban was, it could not stop this kind of behavior with great benefits. Pandora's box had been opened. NetDivClass equals other _ links, download address, phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark to record this. Chapter 470. Chapter 431. The Lady of Darkness and the Beast God's words silenced the main gods. However, not everyone agreed to start a war immediately. Things had not reached that stage yet. The 13 main gods sat around a round table. In front of them was a list from the Lady of Darkness, Daisy. "Let's take a look at this first," Daisy said to the main gods. "In less than half a month, more than 50 gods have been attacked, and more than half of them have been killed. This is especially true for the first batch of gods. More than 80% of them have had their divinity dug out. Due to the suddenness of the incident, even the main gods did not have the time to count the number of victims. Therefore, when such a shocking statistic was placed in front of them, even though they were all supreme existences, they couldn't help but be moved. Although the main gods were high and mighty, it did not mean that they were truly cut off from the world. Every main god's divine kingdom had a large number of mortals and cultivators. There were even gods who resided there. It could be said that every main god's divine kingdom was a huge world. In such a situation, the main gods would naturally pay attention to the survival of the gods below them. In a sense, ordinary gods were the foundation of their existence. If the ordinary gods were killed, then there would be no new main gods in the future. If this continued, the world of gods would be invaded by the neighboring gods sooner or later. The list given by Daisy was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Austin, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Even if we want to negotiate with the other side, we must first cut off those hands that are reaching out." Austin's voice was emotionless, but it contained an indescribable toughness. Once the Lord of Light and Justice spoke, the other 4 main gods of the Light God system, including Van Lun, did not refute. They all tacitly agreed with Austin's position. This was a long-standing habit. Compared to the Darkness God system, which now had 8 main gods, the Light God system was much more united. If they were not united, they would have been destroyed long ago. "That's right. Instead of letting the other side ban us, why don't we do it ourselves?" This was Eugene, the Lord of War, Austin's strongest supporter. The Light God system had already made their stand clear. On the darkness god system's side, the beast god was the first to propose a war. It seemed that the tone of the response had been set. Arrange for a group of level 9 and 10 gods to deal with the stowaways. Lady of Darkness Daisy finally nodded. A deep coldness appeared in her eyes. Then, we'll first hurt them. Geng Chengyun followed Mai Cheng and the others to the world of gods. The 5 of them were astral lords, so it was not difficult for them to enter. With how well the worlds controlled this, there were many stowaways among the world breakers. Due to the popularity of the hunting god operation, the price of the space crystal core had increased. The cost of smuggling had increased. That was why fewer break world people were smuggling. That was why there were fewer break world people. Geng Chengyun and the other Star Lords did not care about this sum of money, and the problem in front of them was how to choose a suitable target. We astral lords, said gods. We astral lords, we God, 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 we gods, gods, God, God, we gods, God gods, we gods, God, God, we. If 2 teams wanted to kill the same god, the god would not be able to escape, but the distribution of the spoils would be a big problem. The 5 of them had friendly relations with each other, and there was a foundation of trust between them. However, competitors were different. The most practical problem was, who had the god's personality? No matter which team it was, the other team would not be at ease. Geng Chengyun said, I think we can ask around and see which gods have been killed. That way, we won't waste our time. The manual said that weak gods often show miracles in the main plane. Why don't we start from the main plane? That works. As long as a god has just shown miracles, he is still alive. They started to discuss, and Mai Cheng nodded. Then let's split up. Everyone, hurry up. Wheel. Just as Mai Cheng was about to decide on the meeting place, he felt his heart sink. An inexplicable pressure rose from the depths of his soul. A white light shone behind them, and a silver-haired girl walked out slowly. She looked at them coldly. My name is Cantina. The silver-haired girl held a silver-white longsword in her hand and pointed it at Mai Cheng and the others. You're stowaways. Mai Cheng was slightly shocked. He did not think that he and the others would have such a bad start. They had just arrived in the Pantheon world, and they were already caught. Another person behind him tugged at his sleeve and said quickly in a low voice, Cantina is a pure goddess, level 9. Before coming to the Pantheon world, Mai Cheng had naturally done his homework. He immediately realized who Cantina was, and his heart grew colder. A level 9 god had come knocking on their door. This, Mai Cheng, who had a guilty conscience, was speechless for a moment. Geng Chengyun hurriedly said, Lady Cantina, we came from the Pantheon world, but we're only here to collect resources. We didn't do anything evil. Mai Cheng was reminded by Geng Chengyun, and he came to his senses. That was right. They hadn't done anything yet. Even if the other party was a level 9 god, they couldn't just attack, right? However, they were in a foreign land after all, and Mai Cheng was not stupid enough to go against them. He hurriedly put on a respectful expression and said, His right. Lady, we. Say no more. Cantina interrupted Mai Cheng. The silver long sword in her hand lit up, and a silver holy light shone on the 5 of them. The 5 of them felt that they could not keep any secrets under this holy light, as if they had been stripped naked and left there. The next moment, Cantina spoke again. No divinity. All of you, go back immediately. Lady, this. Mai Cheng was stunned, and wanted to argue a little more. Cantina turned around coldly. If I see you still wandering around the edge of the world in half an hour, you won't get a second chance. After saying this, the pure goddess had no intention of turning back. Her figure disappeared in an instant. Mai Cheng took a deep breath and said angrily, These gods are really so overbearing. Geng Chengyun, however, looked like he had just survived a disaster. Brother Mai, let's hurry and leave. I have a feeling that they're here for the matter of Hunt God. The others nodded incessantly. Cantina's no divinity earlier was enough to explain the problem. The world was really going to change. Geng Chengyun glanced at the place where Cantina disappeared, and suddenly felt like he was witnessing history with his own eyes. Div class equals other_links text download address mobile reading for convenience of reading next time. You can bookmark this time. Chapter 471, Discovery. Chapter 432. Geng Chengyun and his party were actually very lucky. Dragon Altar Booknet. Longtanshu. They had met the pure goddess Quintina, a ninth-order deity from the Light Pantheon. She was a typical germaphobe and did not like to come into contact with fresh blood. Otherwise, a team of 5 Starlords like them would have been the first to obtain the divinity even if they did not discover it. When the hunting god handbook was found on their bodies, there was no need to say anything else. And if they met a few of the more brutal members of the Dark Pantheon, it was not impossible to kill them on the spot. Geng Chengyun and his party left in a hurry. There were still many Starlords lingering in the Pantheon world. Needless to say, they were all here for the divinity. After the 13 overgods made their decision, the higher-ups of the gods reacted quickly. A group of powerful gods were quickly dispatched to target the smuggled Starlords. Both sides did not pay much attention to the smuggled Starlords. The Starlords benefited from this and could easily come to the Pantheon world. But on the other hand, they were easily tracked down by the gods because they did not take enough security measures. The craze of hunting gods that Ji Yunan had stirred up was quickly suppressed by such a strong suppression. But as mentioned before, the Pandora's box had been opened, and everything had just begun. The Pantheon world. If the neighboring gods were said to be panicking before, now it was the Starlords' turn to cry for their parents. The overgods' response was too decisive. More than half of the smuggled Starlords were killed on the spot, and the remaining half had their handbooks found on them. Naturally, the result was the same. Only a very small portion of the lucky ones, or the innocent ones who did not participate in god hunting, were sent back. But even so, cases of accidental killings were unavoidable. Even some innocent Starlords who had gone to the Pantheon world a long time ago and did not know about god hunting were affected in this purge. More importantly, be it the Starlords or the gods, they were not alone. They had a huge network of connections behind them. That was how the feud was formed. In Shadao Heaven, Song Fei was looking at his disciple standing in front of him with a rare expression of a headache. Song Fei had many personal disciples, but only a handful of them had truly become great astral lords of a region. Fang Chaoyun of the Heaven of Terpsichore was naturally one of them. However, Old Man Fang's temper had always been explosive, even though he cultivated the Confucian Tao, which was supposed to be calm and composed. Therefore, Song Fei's favorite disciple wasn't Fang Chaoyun, but this person before him. Feng Yutian Shi Yayan's cultivation was slightly lower than Fang Chaoyun's, only at rank 9. However, his temperament and bearing were much stronger. Fang Chaoyun would go to Shadao Heaven every other day, while Shi Yayan would only come to pay his respects, but he would not come for his own matters even once in 100 years. Therefore, this time he came, Song Fei had to give him an explanation. At the same time, he had to give himself an explanation. Master, you know. Shi Yayan said calmly, little junior brother went to the world of gods 600 years ago to research the difference between the power of faith and the divine path's incense. How could this have anything to do with Hunt the Gods? Just 2 days ago, little junior brother sent a letter saying that he finally had a breakthrough in his research, and that he might come back in a few decades. He also said that he missed the food in his hometown. As Shi Yayan spoke, his voice was finally tinged with anger. Master, tell me, little junior brother doesn't even know what's going on here. How could he have anything to do with the god of Hunt? Hearing this, Song Fei already understood what Shi Yayan was trying to say. He sighed softly. The little junior brother that Shi Yayan spoke of was Song Fei's last disciple, Lu Yang. Ever since he embarked on the path of cultivation, he had been interested in all kinds of strange and unorthodox methods. 600 years ago, Lu Yang suddenly fell in love with the path of incense. After researching related spells, he ran to the world of gods and had not returned until now. Song Fei knew better than anyone that Lu Yang would not be interested in Hunt the Gods if his personal disciple wanted help from a world breaker. There were plenty in Shadao Heaven. Why would he need to do something like this? However, Song Fei also knew that he had to remain calm at this time. If even path-fusing practitioners like them acted on impulse, a war between the two worlds would be inevitable. Therefore, Song Fei said in a low voice, I will give you an explanation, but not now. Shi Yayan was silent for a while, then nodded slowly. After Song Fei sent Shi Yayan away, he immediately gathered all the path-fusing practitioners. Logically speaking, as one of the more advanced path-fusing practitioners, not everyone would give him face. However, this time was an exception. Other than Elder Zi Luo, who had disappeared without a trace, even Ju Po, who had always been elusive, showed up. All 13 heavens were present. "It's rare to see you." Soldier Zhu Jiming looked to the side, a funny expression on his face. Beside him stood an ordinary-looking, bearded man dressed in a black robe. From his appearance, no one would believe that he was the most mysterious of the 13 heavens, Ju Po. Ju Po did not seem to mind at all. He smiled and said, "If you want to see me so much, can I go to your martial soldier heaven every day to stay for a while?" "Forget it." Zhu Jiming quickly waved his hand and said, "I can't afford a god like you." Path-fusing practitioners did not have many chances to meet, but it was not the time to greet each other. Song Fei coughed and said, "Everyone, let's get down to business." Zhu Jiming turned around and said to Song Fei, "Old Song, I heard that your disciple was killed. Don't be polite to those gods. Let them see what it means to be the number one in the sky." When it came to making people hate people, Zhu Jiming was definitely good at it. He was the number one person in the sky who could make people hate him. Song Fei already knew his character, so he ignored him and brought the topic back to business. This god-hunting operation may directly lead to a war. What do you all think? Lu Wen was the first to answer. "Let's catch the person who planned all this first. Otherwise, no one knows what else he has hidden. We have to find the person who planned it, but now that things are like this, finding out won't affect the big picture," Yu Lian said. God personality can create world breakers. This is something everyone knows. Who can guarantee that the planet masters won't be tempted? Lu Wen did not say anything because he knew that Yu Lian was speaking the truth. Although the world of gods could hunt and kill planet masters, that was because many people were blinded by greed and were not careful enough when sneaking in. Once this wave passed, the planet masters had many ways to hide in the dark. They could even borrow the hands of others to take action. They were all planet masters. Who was more stupid than the other? Facing such a situation, the 13 path-fusing practitioners felt that things were getting tricky. Div class equals other_links text download address phone reading. To make it easier to read next time, you can bookmark this page. Chapter 472 Chapter 4. Chapter 433. The Star-Lord's hunting of gods had already become an activity that concerned the young Star-Lord's core interests. It was not something that could be stopped with a single order. The 13 fused path participants were very clear on this point. But then again, from the fact that Lu Wen was still in the mood to argue with the planners, it was clear that they were not as anxious as the neighboring lords. This time, the gods had been hunted and some of the Star-Lords had been hunted down by the powerful gods of the Pantheon world. Both sides had suffered considerable losses. However, they were already dead, and there was no way to resurrect them. What they needed to worry about was what would happen in the future. The Pantheon world had to curb the god-hunting operation, or the gods would be killed off sooner or later. The heavens, on the other hand, did not have such a problem. The more the young Star-Lords died, the more afraid they became. They could not possibly kill themselves, right? The real headache for the 13 heavens was that the lords of the Pantheon world were so unyielding that they did not know how to deal with them. The death of Song Fei's disciple in the Pantheon world was no secret among the fused path participants. They naturally had their own channels of information. They also knew that similar situations were not uncommon. They might even encounter the same situation as Song Fei. Therefore, apart from a big-hearted person like Zhu Jiming, no one would bring this up. In other words, as more and more Star-Lords were implicated, the web of relationships would link to them sooner or later. Therefore, no one present brought this up first. They were all waiting for Song Fei to make a decision. As long as he made a decision, everyone would follow suit. Even if there was a scolding, it would be directed at Song Fei. Song Fei looked around. Seeing that these fused path participants were either clearly indifferent to the matter or were filled with righteous indignation, but in reality, they did not reveal anything. Song Fei could only sigh inwardly. War cannot be waged lightly. After a moment of silence, Song Fei finally gave an answer that satisfied everyone. Everyone seemed to heave a collective sigh of relief. This was the answer that the fused path participants were waiting for. If the Light Pantheon world was incomparably united and the Darkness Pantheon world was slightly loose, then the heavens was basically a plate of loose sand. The 13 fused path participants all fought on their own. At most, there were 2 who had a slightly better relationship and formed offensive and defensive alliances. There had never been a true united faction. If they were to really start a war with the Pantheon world, the heavenly worlds would definitely be in bigger trouble. More importantly, the main gods on the other side wanted to start a war. On one hand, they wanted to vent their anger, and on the other hand, they wanted to strike fear into the hearts of the Star Lords on this side, so that the god-hunting prohibition would become a true prohibition. To them, stopping losses was equivalent to gaining profits. But what were the benefits of starting a war in the 13 heavens? No. The minor Star Lords were the ones who obtained the godhoods, but the ones leading the charge were the Tao integration stage deities. There would be no benefits if they won, and they would be laughed at if they lost. Who would be willing to do such a thing? However, although it was good to take the initiative to admit defeat, he would be cursed if it was spread out. Therefore, everyone was waiting for Song Fei to take the lead. Song Fei looked at everyone's expressions and suddenly smiled. He turned around and said, "Hunting God was a case of harming others to benefit oneself. It was indeed wrong. However, my disciple Liu Yang has been residing in the Pantheon world for 600 years. What does this have to do with him?" The converged Pathmasters did not expect him to change the topic so abruptly. While they were still in a daze, Song Fei spoke again. "I'm willing to head to the Pantheon world alone to seek justice for my disciple. I ask that all of you stay behind to avoid any misunderstandings." Everyone finally understood Song Fei's plan. He was trying to be a hero all by himself and make them endorse him. A silver-haired man who had not spoken before now smiled faintly and said, "Since fellow Daoist Song's disciple was wrongly accused, how can we ignore it? I'm willing to go with you." This was the Milky Way Starlord Sai Yun, the one who hid a 9 Serenities heavenly demon in his astral world. It was the only stellar sea quasi-astral world among the 13 heavens. Song Fei smiled bitterly and advised, "That's why I said that war must not be rashly started, don't say any more. How can we let outsiders bully us in the Pantheon world? Let's go together." That's right. Isn't it just a god being hunted? That's because they were inferior. Now they're turning around and killing the innocent. Do they really think there's no one in the Pantheon world who can stop them? For a moment, the crowd was agitated. There was no trace of the silence from before. Those who did not know would think that Song Fei's rallying power was so strong that it might become a good story in the future. Only the people involved knew what was going on. Song Fei had always been thinking about the big picture. He could go alone and not rashly start a war. How could he be willing to be the one to stand up? Leading a war would give him a good reputation among the young Starlords, but it might not be the same in the circle of the big Starlords. After all, they did not lack world breakers. They could not benefit from the god-hunting operation, but they had to fight because Song Fei was the leader. Wouldn't they blame Song Fei for it? But Song Fei had already said it. The other fusing Tao would not let him take it back. No matter what his original intention was, the title of pro-war had already been given to Song Fei. "Thank you, Master." Shi Yayan had been staying in Shidaotian. When Song Fei returned, he had already gone to greet him and bowed deeply. Song Fei did not have any doubts. He knew that once he said that, the others would spread the news and confirm his identity as the leader. "You and I are master and disciple. There is no need to talk about this." Song Fei was prepared. He smiled and said, "This time, you will go with me. But remember, we are only going to get justice for your little brother." "I understand." Shi Yayan was very careful. He knew what kind of predicament Song Fei was facing. He said solemnly, "If you are right, go everywhere in the world. Do not fight." Song Fei nodded and said, "Go." After the 13 days meeting, Song Fei returned to Shidaotian alone. But he knew that someone would come soon. "I did not expect you to come first." Song Fei looked at the person in front of him with a smile that said, "I knew it." In the spacious hall, only two figures stood facing each other. After all, this was a place to meet the fusing Tao. Song Fei would not let his disciples watch. It was Zhu Jiming from Martial Soldier Heaven. This fusing Tao was good at attracting hatred. He had just mocked Song Fei in front of his face. Now, he turned around and came to meet him privately. He did not seem embarrassed at all. "Our thoughts are the same." Zhu Jiming didn't waste any more time talking nonsense and immediately said this. "Oh." Song Fei did not deny it. "You do not want to fight." Zhu Jiming continued, "As long as we fight, you will be scolded no matter whether you win or lose. And I do not want that either." For people at the level of the 13 days, face did not matter. However, when it did not involve specific interests, sometimes it was just a reputation that they fought for. The better the reputation, the easier it was to attract people to join them. This was no different from a Star Lord who had not reached Tao integration. Why? Chapter 434. Yes, it was because of the Heavenly Deity Council. He had no choice but to admit that the existence of the Heavenly Deity Society had greatly affected the situation in the various heavens. Song Fei would definitely pay attention to the Celestial Deity Society because his old rival, Old Man Zi Luo, was in it. Zhu Jiming would also pay attention to the Deity Society because his pursuer, Shui Ren, was in it. To some extent, Song Fei and Zhu Jiming were both threatened by the members of the Celestial Society, but they were also different. Song Fei didn't have to worry too much. He could even attack Old Man Zi Luo directly. They had a personal grudge. If Zhu Jiming attacked Shui Ren openly, he would be in big trouble. There were too many people who could threaten Zhu Jiming. If he killed Shui Ren, he would become the target of public criticism. Therefore, when the Empyrean Association appeared, Zhu Jiming was relieved. If Shui Ren could go to the Pantheon world to attain enlightenment, he would have nothing to worry about. Instead, he would have an additional person who could help him share the burden. It was a win-win situation. Therefore, he did not want the two sides to go to war. If a war broke out, it would be much more difficult for Shui Ren to reach enlightenment. One of them was a supporter of the Heavenly Deity Society, while the other was a mortal enemy of the Heavenly Deity Society. However, they had a common goal in deciding whether or not to start a war. Song Fei stared at him for a long time and finally said, "In that case, please help me, Brother Zhu." Ji Yunan was sitting in the God Kingdom, and he didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. He was leisurely drinking tea and reading a book that he found somewhere. Ever since the Hunting God Handbook was announced, he had been staying in the Divine Kingdom and had not taken a single step out of it. At the same time, he had also refused any Star Lords to visit him, acting as if he was in seclusion until his death. On the one hand, it was to avoid arousing suspicion. On the other hand, it was also because he didn't want to communicate with others at times like this. The more he spoke, the more mistakes he would make. After all, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the person who wrote the Hunting God Handbook was someone who had a deep understanding of the Pantheon world and the gods. To be precise, when it came to god-slaying techniques, the gods themselves were no match for Ji Yunan. Ji Yunan only put down the book in his hand after receiving the contents of the Tao Integration Conference. "Leader Song Fei?" Ji Yunan touched his chin and seemed to be thinking about something. Ji Yunan had already learned that Song Fei's little apprentice was framed and killed, which was not out of his expectation. It wasn't that he had planned everything perfectly, but he knew that as the situation developed, this kind of thing would happen sooner or later. If it wasn't Song Fei, it would be someone else. It was just that the 13 Heavens' determination to go to war had somewhat exceeded his expectations. He had originally thought that this group of people would not do something so strenuous and unrewarding. If they can fight, then that's even better, it'll save me a lot of trouble. I'm just afraid that they'll still have the mind to. Ji Yunan didn't think that characters at the level of the 13 Heavens would have such simple thoughts. Ji Yunan thought for a while and said to Red Tail, "Find out what information we can use. We can't rely on these Tao integration cultivators." Red Tail seemed to be prepared and handed over a piece of information. Liu Yang still has a wife and children in the Pantheon world. His wife used to be a famous beauty on the Nightmare Continent, and his son just turned 14. At this point, Red Tail couldn't help but chuckle. We found out that there's a god of lust in the Darkness Pantheon. Houston is the god of lust, yes, but that doesn't mean he's a pervert. Ji Nan waved his hand and interrupted Red Tail. The god of lust, Houston, was one of the 8 gods. His godhood was related to love and lust. However, this was the law of nature, and it didn't mean that the gods themselves were lustful. In fact, Houston was a guy with a pure heart and few desires. He usually didn't even touch women. Red Tail was stunned, as if he hadn't expected such an outcome. But your train of thought is still very good. Ji Nan patted Red Tail on the shoulder and said with narrowed eyes, "Give me the information on Liu Yang's wife and children. I'll go there personally." Yes. Liu Yang's wife and children were a breakthrough point, and Ji Nan was very clear about this. Right now, all parties were extremely tense. The higher-ups on both sides maintained a certain degree of restraint, but it was difficult for the astral lords and gods to make such a rational judgment. At the end of the day, this was directly related to their interests, and the higher-ups were more concerned about the future. But in a situation like this, all they needed was a gentle push, and everything would be irreversible. What? You said a push wasn't enough. Then continue to push. Ji Nan, who had never had any hope of success, came to God's world again. In fact, God's world was very strict with the people who came from all the skies. Every visitor had to be checked, especially those who were break world and above. But this was not a problem for Ji Nan. He knew the gods too well, and he had many ways to deal with them. Song Fei and the others should be here soon. I have to hurry, Ji Nan thought. He had already memorized the information Red Tail provided. Nightmare Continent. It was one of the main planes controlled by the dark gods. Although the name sounded creepy, it was actually a normal main plane. The reason why this place was called the Nightmare Continent was that the god who conquered this continent was the original god of nightmare, the current Lord of Nightmare. Of course, because it had been controlled by the King of Nightmare for many years, there were many traces left on the continent. For example, Ji Nan was standing in front of an inverted garden. It was a typical nightmare secret land. This is the 391st Nightmare Land, Mr. A man in a black suit stood in front of Ji Nan and introduced the place. The garden in front of the two of them was hanging in the air in a weird way. All the birds and beasts were walking upside down. There were many weird nightmare lands on the Nightmare Continent, but these places often had strange rules. They were the best places for adventurers to train. Liu Yang's only son, Liu Jialiang, was studying in this nightmare land. I heard that people who come here are from good families, Ji Nan asked casually as he looked at the inverted garden. He knew a little about the Nightmare Continent, but it wasn't very deep. At least, he didn't know it like the back of his hand. Yes. The man in the suit nodded and smiled. The 391st Nightmare Land is a famous aristocratic college. Ordinary people can't afford to pay here. Did anything strange happen here recently? No. Everything is normal. Oh, a boy got into a fight with someone 2 days ago. He seemed to have been hit in the head, but his family couldn't be contacted. Ji Nan gave a weird smile and nodded. At this time, in the 391st Nightmare Land, the boy named Liu Jialiang was hiding alone in a corner. There were still traces of blood on his forehead. His eyes were filled with anger. He clenched his fists and held a pendant in front of his chest. Chapter 435. LV Jialiang had just celebrated his 14th birthday half a month ago. But this 14-year-old boy was so mature that he didn't look his age. It wasn't because LV Jialiang was precocious, but because he was forced by reality. On his 14th birthday, the boy didn't see his father, who he could only see once a year. Only his mother came alone, and she brought bad news. LV Jialiang's grip on the pendant tightened unconsciously. Something happened to father, that must be it. LV Jialiang had a plan. Although she didn't say it explicitly, his mother's expression told LV Jialiang this clearly. Moreover, his mother didn't take him away, which meant an even more terrifying truth. Even his mother couldn't guarantee her own safety and didn't dare to keep him by her side, preferring to leave him in the land of nightmares. Brook, that guy, he must know something. The boy's gaze was cold, and he saw through everything. Brook's uncle was the personal attendant of a great god. Although he wasn't particularly powerful, he was definitely well informed. If not for that, Brook wouldn't have dared to purposely find fault with him. Thinking about this, LV Jiaoliang shrunk his body a little more, trying to hide in the shadows as he looked ahead with a determined gaze. This was the only way Brook had to pass to return to his dormitory. He's here. With a series of footsteps, Brook's swaying figure appeared in front of him. Brook, who was already over 25 years old, was already at the age where he couldn't drink without alcohol. Even in the land of nightmares, he maintained the habit of drinking. LV Jiaoliang took a step forward, and suddenly pulled out the pendant in his hand. It instantly turned into a long sword, and he pointed it at Brook. Brook was still in a drunken state, and couldn't react in time to such a sudden attack. His shoulder was immediately hit, and this was the result of LV Jiaoliang avoiding a vital point. LV Jiaoliang probably didn't expect the sword to hit him so easily. Even though he hadn't seen blood before, he was shocked. But the boy quickly calmed down, and looked at Brook coldly. He said in a cold voice, "Brook, do you still want to live or die? Tell me what happened." The sharp pain from his shoulder made Brook wake up, and at the same time, he saw the boy's face clearly. "Lu, you dare to sneak up on me." Brook did not panic. Instead, he was enraged. Because he knew that the other party would not dare to kill him, otherwise, the other party would not have been able to leave this place. "Do you think anyone can protect you? What a joke." Brook was so angry that he laughed. "It won't be long before those adults catch you, you foreign bastard." LV Jiaoliang's unique name was a clear indication of his origin. This was also the biggest conflict between him and the natives. LV Jiaoliang's heart blazed with rage, and he simply wanted to kill this detestable fellow with a single strike of his sword. However, he didn't completely lose his reason in the end. If he left the land of nightmares now, there would still be hope of escaping. But if he killed Brook, it would definitely trigger the alarm, and then he wouldn't be able to leave. He had already verified the conjecture in his heart. Was it worth it to exchange his life for this idiot's? LV Jiaoliang didn't need to think too much and immediately made a decision. He sheathed his sword and gave Brook a hard slap. Then, he kicked him a few more times to vent his anger. Finally, he turned around and fled. Brook was dizzy from the beating, and only regained his senses after a long while. He hurriedly pressed on the wound on his shoulder. "Damn bastard! Who are you?" He struggled to stand up, but he saw a young man in a white robe standing in front of him. This person had no intention of paying attention to him, and only lowered his head to look at the wound on his shoulder. The next moment, a pitch-black sword appeared. The length, width, and sharpness of the blade were exactly the same as LV Jiaoliang's sword. Fart! The black sword instantly pierced Brook's heart. The latter's eyes widened in disbelief, and his body slowly collapsed. Before LV Jiaoliang could walk out of the door of the land of nightmares, he was shocked by the alarm that resounded through the night sky. By the time he wanted to leave, it was already too late. The relevant personnel had immediately sealed off the entrance of the land of nightmares, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. Damn it! Who the hell triggered the alarm at this time? Of course, LV Jiaoliang didn't think it was his fault, because he didn't kill Brook. As for the sword wound, it was only a superficial wound, and the land of nightmares wouldn't care about such things. LV Jiaoliang could only return to the dormitory, wait for the alarm to be lifted, and then think of a way to sneak out of the land of nightmares. It wasn't until a middle-aged man with a wooden expression and a bit of dignity appeared in front of LV Jiaoliang with a group of people that the youth realized something was wrong. "Sir Andy, this is LV Jiaoliang." The person in charge of the land of nightmares stood at the side respectfully, and said to the middle-aged man. LV Jiaoliang recognized him. He had seen him with Brook before. It was Brook's uncle. Legend had it that he was the confidant of a god, and his strength had reached the peak of the legendary realm. "Come on, your father is the legendary master of stars." LV Jiaoliang cheered himself on in his heart. Even if something happened to his father, he must not embarrass him. However, the first sentence that came out of his mouth stunned LV Jiaoliang on the spot. Was it you who killed Brooke? Brooke's uncle said calmly, without any change in expression on his face. No. I didn't. LV Jialiang immediately roared. He couldn't stand others putting the blame on him. I only stabbed him once. The youth's voice stopped abruptly, because he saw Brooke's body being carried up slowly. Brooke's uncle didn't say anything, he just looked at him coldly, and suddenly reached out to grab the pendant in front of LV Jialiang's chest. Then, with a forceful pull, the silver longsword was pulled out again. The middle-aged man called and he calmly looked at the long sword, and then said, "It matches the two sword wounds perfectly. This sword can be brought back as material evidence." What do you mean? LV Jialiang felt a chill in his heart. He had a bad premonition, and began to step back gradually. Andy grabbed his shoulder, and said coldly, "It means that you will be treated as a murderer, and will be brought back to the Holy Kingdom with us to be judged." I didn't kill anyone. LV Jialiang's roar became louder. He was so angry that his eyes were about to crack. He saw all this as a plot by the other party to frame him. Andy just said calmly, "Brooke became the oracle of our Lord 2 years ago. Even if he wasn't pious sometimes, he couldn't be killed for no reason." Chapter 436. Shi Yayan followed his teacher to the Pantheon world at an extremely fast speed. They did not hide their arrival from anyone. Everything was under the surveillance of the Pantheon world's deities. They did not need to hide, because they were here to seek justice for Lu Yang. Zhu Jiming was the only Dao-fusing cultivator who came with him. The others did not really come with him. Song Fei was the leader. It was enough for Song Fei to be the leader. They didn't really want to start a war between the two sides. "Teacher, I'm going to pick up junior brother's family first," Shi Yayan said as soon as he arrived. "Okay." Song Fei nodded. "I'll go see Kusis. You must ensure the safety of your junior brother's wife and children." Kusis was the Lord of Nightmare's real name. Lu Yang had lived in the Nightmare continent when he was young, and it was there that he was framed and killed. Of course, Kusis had to take the blame. "Yes," Shi Yayan responded, bowed respectfully to Zhu Jiming, and left quickly. "Good upbringing." Zhu Jiming sighed. Shi Yayan still remembered to bow to him at this time. If it were his family members, they would have long disappeared. Song Fei smiled and said, "If you are willing to send a few people to Shi Daotian, I promise to teach them well for you." "No need." Zhu Jiming waved his hand. If he really sent them to Shi Daotian, they might not even be his people after the brainwashing. Shi Yayan quickly found Lu Yang's wife in the Pantheon world. In fact, this information was semi-public, so it was not difficult to find. Lu Yang's wife was called Sophia. She was not a big shot, but a native woman of the Nightmare continent. Decades ago, Lu Yang's divine soul was damaged because of an experimental accident, and even his residence was blown to pieces. That was how he met Sophia. Lu Yang, who was depressed at that time, walked out of the shadow under Sophia's guidance. At the same time, he fell in love with this mortal woman and married her. Later, he found a way to prolong Sophia's life and gave birth to a son with her. That was how he got to where he was today. "I am Lu Yang's senior brother." Shi Yayan looked at the woman in front of him calmly and said. The woman standing in front of him looked to be in her 20s. There was an indescribable charm to her face, but her expression was somewhat haggard. Hello. Sophia said cautiously, "Your Excellency, is Lu Yang really not coming back?" Sophia was a mortal who had not even reached the legendary realm. She could only see Lu Yang being taken away by those high and mighty deities, yet she still hoped that her husband would have a chance to return. Shi Yayan couldn't help but fall silent. "After a long time," he said, "little junior brother has been assassinated. Master and I have come to seek justice for him." Sophia's face turned even paler. She was like a prisoner on death row who had finally been notified that she was going to the execution ground. Seeing this, Shi Yayan could only sigh and say, "I heard that junior brother still has a child here. Where is he?" "Little Jiao Liang is in the nightmare land of 391. I'm afraid that someone will harm him, so I don't dare to take him away," Sophia said. With her knowledge and ability, it wasn't wrong to do so. The Nightmare Land was an official organization after all, and had a certain degree of protection. However, Shi Yayan also knew that this was no small matter. A mere mortal force on the Nightmare Continent wouldn't be taken seriously by anyone with ulterior motives. Please bring me there immediately. Sophia looked even more panicked. Could it be that someone will harm Jioliang? I can't rule out that possibility. Shi Yan was as honest as ever. What? You said that Jioliang has been taken away? Sophia stood in the hall of the Nightmare Land. She only felt dizzy and inexplicable grief and indignation. How could you do this? It was precisely because she believed in the Nightmare Land that she felt that as subordinates of the great Nightmare Lord, they definitely wouldn't be afraid of power. Who knew? She didn't know that the relationship between the Nightmare Land and the Lord of the Nightmare Land was worlds apart. They were merely subordinates in name. The person in charge of the Nightmare Land no longer treated her warmly. Instead, he secretly sized up Shi Yan a few times, wondering if he was some important person. However, he answered quickly, putting on an innocent expression. LV Jialiang killed Brooke. Lord Andy took him away as a murderer. We couldn't stop him. After the person in charge finished speaking, the two understood what was going on. Sophia became even more anxious, and hurriedly asked Shi Yan for help. Based on her understanding of her son, it wasn't impossible for him to kill Brooke in a fit of rage. Where was he taken? Shi Yan asked coldly. Lord Andy is His Highness Fegman's attendant. The person in charge didn't dare to hide anything. He immediately revealed Andy's background. It wasn't much of a secret anyway. The god of gluttony, Fegman, a level 9 god of the Darkness Pantheon. He was one of the gods that had existed since ancient times. Shi Yan nodded and calmly thanked the person in charge. He then left with Sophia. Where are we going? Sophia didn't understand. To find Faye. Shi Yan was halfway through his sentence when he suddenly stopped. This was because he saw a silver light shining in the sky. The terrifying sword gleam that descended from the sky caused Shi Yan to react instantly. He quickly struck out with his palm. Sophia and the person in charge of the Nightmare Lands, who were beside him, had no idea what was going on. They only felt a strong gust of wind, and then nothing happened. Shi Yan retracted his palm and looked at the sky in confusion. It didn't contain any sword will. It was purely driven by strength. It should be a local powerhouse. Who would be at the absolute level of a god? There were many gods who used swords in the world of gods. Furthermore, the other party had only attacked roughly and retreated after one strike. Shi Yan couldn't guess who it was. Senior Sha, what's wrong? Sophia finally managed to say the tongue-twisting title. It's nothing. Shi Yan shook his head. Someone probably noticed me and wanted to test me. Sophia nodded in confusion. The person in charge beside her secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The person who came to test him looked so weak. The person in charge probably wouldn't be too strong, right? Shi Yan quickly left with Sophia. When the person in charge called for his subordinates to return, he turned his head and saw a shocking scene. Behind him, the Nightmare Lands 391 had been split in half. What separated them was a sword mark that was several meters deep. In the distant horizon, Ji Yunan's figure slowly appeared. He was still mumbling to himself. A giant palm driven by the laws. I'll call it the Vajra palm for now. Chapter 437. The Pantheon world was very different from the heavenly planes, and that was the divine kingdoms of the various gods. They did not exist naturally, but were built by the divine kingdoms themselves. Some of the gods paid special attention to the concealment of their divine kingdoms. Even if they could be located using spatial coordinates, the location of the divine kingdoms in the void was extremely complicated, making it difficult to find them directly. The god of gluttony, Fegman, was one such existence. He built his divine kingdom in the depths of the void, and just entering and exiting the divine kingdom required a few spatial leaps. Legend had it that this god did not care much about faith, and his greatest hobby was to hide in his divine kingdom every day, looking for a pile of delicacies to feast on. Hence, Shi Yan would have to spend a lot of effort to find the location of the god of gluttony. It's already the third time. With 2 more spatial leaps, we'll reach the divine kingdom, Andy said calmly as he stood in front of the crowd, watching them all vomit with their heads lowered. Lord Andy, why are there still 2 more? Blarg. One of the youths was in agony. Don't we usually only need 4? The spatial laws of the Pantheon world were rather stable, so spatial leaps were an extremely undesirable experience for those who were not strong enough. Andy replied calmly, we still have to bring him back for trial, so we can't let him die. Hence, we took a longer route to weaken the shockwaves. The him Andy was referring to was naturally LV Jialiang. The youth was currently sprawled on the ground, his face pale, and he was about to collapse from vomiting. He did not even have the strength to move. LV Jialiang was the weakest, so he was the most affected. Lord, why don't we find a place to rest first? The person who spoke earlier had a bitter expression on his face. I think if we continue, he'll really die along the way. He patted LV Jialiang's shoulder, who was already exhaling more than he was inhaling. Andy was silent for a moment before finally nodding. All right. Although they were in a hurry to bring back the killer of the god's emissary, they were in no hurry to do so in a day or two. Even if they returned to the divine kingdom on their own, they had never experienced 5 spatial leaps in a row. Seeing that Andy had agreed, the person beside him smiled and got up to kick LV Jialiang. Hurry up and get up, you murderer. LV Jialiang flipped over from the kick. He had no strength left in his body, but when he heard the other party's words, he still forced himself to shout, I'm not. The man sneered and was about to teach the young man a lesson when he suddenly realized that something was wrong. LV Jialiang fell sideways to the ground, but the shadow under him was expanding bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, it was the width of several people, like a huge, sinister mouth. What is this? Before Andy and the others could react, LV Jialiang's entire body fell into the shadows, as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. His shrill screams seemed to echo in everyone's ears. The scene was so creepy that everyone felt that their hair was standing on end. Only Andy, who was at the peak of legendary, could remain calm. Which highness is here? He suppressed the fear in his heart and shouted to the people around him. After all, they were the divine emissaries of a level 9 god. Even if the other party was a powerful existence, they wouldn't do something like this for no reason. Bang! A giant palm suddenly fell from the sky and smashed the group of people into meat paste. After using the method that Shi Yayan had subconsciously used to get rid of Andy and the others, Ji Yunan turned around and left this small plane, continuing his journey towards Fegman's god kingdom. However, even he did not expect that the moment he stepped out of this plane, he would meet an unexpected person. Including the time with Goro, you've already used the trick of framing others 3 times. Daoist Spirit Son, who had the face of an uncle in his 30s, looked at Ji Yunan helplessly and said. Ji Yunan looked at him coldly and curled his lips. You even know about this? It's not a very clever trick. Daoist Spirit Son shook his head. If the first time Ji Yunan used this trick, Diana and the other gods were still confused by him, then Daoist Spirit Son, who had already sensed it, would not be so easy to fool him. This time, after observing Ji Yunan's every move, he naturally understood what he wanted to do. You're not suited to playing tricks. It's not your style. Daoist Spirit Son looked ahead coldly. The God Hunter's Manual is a good move. I didn't expect you to want to start a war between the 2 realms. Ji Yunan's style had always been straightforward, and the God Hunter's Manual was a real overt plot. Compared to this, Taoist Ling Yang did not think much of his trick of shifting the blame onto others. There are too many loopholes. Daoist Spirit Son shook his head lightly. Even if a god's emissary dies, it won't be enough to make both sides lose their cool. Instead, it will expose you. This time, Ji Yunan was not in a hurry. He crossed his arms and said, What are you trying to say? Daoist Spirit Son stared into his eyes and said, There are so many loopholes, which means that Zhuang Xian and Shui Ren were not involved in it. Is this your personal action? So what if it is? Stop it. Daoist Spirit Son sighed. Follow me back to the Heavenly God Assembly. I will think of a way to deal with the aftermath. If the 2 realms go to war, who knows how many people will be plunged into misery and suffering? Why bother? Ji Yunan almost laughed out loud. How come I didn't know that you were actually so compassionate? Forget it, I won't talk to you anymore. The person I'm waiting for is here. Daoist Spirit Son was stunned. Shi Yan's figure had already appeared in a small plain nearby. Of course, Ji Yunan was not idle after talking so much nonsense with Daoist Spirit Sunday. He had already predicted that his target would appear here, so he was just waiting for him. Ji Yunan was far more familiar with the path to the Gluttony Divine Nation than these visitors from the other realms. As long as Shi Yan wanted to go there, he would definitely pass through this void. Daoist Spirit Sun's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly looked up, but Ji Yunan's figure instantly disappeared, leaving behind only a trace of an almost undetectable nomological aura. Daoist Spirit Sun, who already knew him very well, was slightly stunned. He said in disbelief, "World level?" In the endless void of the world of gods, Song Fei and Zhu Jiming stood side by side. Standing in front of them were the Lord of War, Eugene, and the Lord of Nightmares. Since two people from the other realms had come, the other side naturally sent two overgods to receive them. It just so happened that the two great celestial systems sent one person each. Eugene had volunteered, while the Lord of Nightmares had come because of Song Fei's little disciple. Liu Yang had died in his territory, so he couldn't refuse even if he wanted to. Chapter 438. Accident. Song Fei raised his brows and sneered at the Lord of Nightmares, Kusesi. From his appearance, Kotsis was a somewhat emaciated old man. His skin was slightly grey, and there were some wrinkles on his face. He did not look very spirited. "That's right," Kusesi said slowly. Kotsis said slowly, "The god who dealt with him only found out after the fact that he had settled here 600 years ago. The reason why he was dealt with was because he was suspected of being involved in a god hunt." Song Fei frowned slightly. He only understood what had happened after Kusesi explained further. It wasn't that complicated. When the gods were hunting down a god hunter, they found that he had been in contact with Liu Yang and suspected that he was involved in the matter. But in fact, that god hunter was indeed Liu Yang's good friend. He came to the Pantheon world with the excuse of visiting Liu Yang and secretly engaged in god hunting. There was no lack of cool-headed people among the Star Lords. This kind of concealment method was definitely much more brilliant than Mai Cheng and the others. When the gods came to investigate, although Liu Yang wasn't very strong and didn't even have the time to choose his astral realm, he was very stubborn. After all, he was the personal disciple of a Tao convergence expert. How could he tolerate being searched? After the conflict, Liu Yang was killed on the spot. Perhaps Liu Yang himself didn't expect the situation to be this serious. But there was no time for regret in this world. Song Fei listened to him with a gloomy face. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed. Near the Gluttony Divine Kingdom. When Taoist Spirit Sun hurried over, Shi Yan had been completely dismembered by Ji Yunan. The head of this proud disciple of Song Fei was thrown to the side with a look of disbelief on his face. Not to mention him, even Taoist Spirit Sun couldn't imagine that a Star Lord who was equivalent to a rank 9 could not even survive a single blow from Ji Yunan. Didn't he just advance to realm rank? If he was already at this stage, wouldn't he be able to kill fusing Daos as easily as slaughtering dogs when he really advanced to heaven rank? Ji Yunan didn't find it strange at all. Shi Yan didn't even have a chance to resist his sneak attack. His heart was directly crushed. After all, Ji Yunan could already fight against a Type 10 expert head-on, and he could even launch sneak attacks. In his hands, a Star Lord was no different from a mortal. Reality wasn't a novel. It wasn't a matter of who was stronger than who just showed off their combat power. The characteristics of the ability, the state, the sequence of attacks, and so on would all greatly affect the final result. Ji Yunan didn't care about Daoist Spirit Sun's arrival. Holding a long sword in his hand, he cut Shi Yan's body into neat pieces. When the corpse was completely cut up, he burned it with fire. Daoist Spirit Yang watched all this in silence. Having some understanding of the god of gluttony, he knew very well what Ji Yunan was doing. Completely cutting the soul and the body was exactly what Fegman was doing before he ate the food. He's still trying to frame me. But this time, Daoist Spirit Yang no longer felt that such a method was clumsy. The reason was simple: the one who died was Shi Yan. The death of an oracle was insignificant and would not affect the judgment of either side. But what if the one who died was Shi Yayan? Song Fei's 2 disciples died in the Pantheon world. One of them had followed him here and was killed right in front of his eyes. If he could still admit defeat, he could go back and wait for Shi Daotian to completely collapse. This was an overt plot. Daoist Spirit Yang looked at Ji Yunan silently. He truly understood the purpose of all of his actions. He acted crudely because he didn't care. When Shi Yayan died, all the flaws would no longer be flaws. What benefits does starting a war between the 2 worlds benefit you? Daoist Spirit Yang slowly collected his thoughts and asked with a serious expression. Ji Yunan was currently completely disposing of Shi Yayan's body. He shook his head and smiled. Didn't I tell you long ago? Ji Yunan's words made Daoist Spirit Yang slightly stunned. Before he could think further, Ji Yunan's fist was already smashing towards his face. A punch to the head, merciless. Since Ji Yunan had seen through his secret, he had to kill him. Ji Yunan had never hesitated because of their past friendship. But the expected scene of his head exploding did not happen. A blue light appeared in front of Daoist Spirit Yang. It was a Dao talisman that was emitting a faint light in front of them. Ji Yunan recognized this Dao talisman. It was the Dao talisman that Daoist Spirit Yang had used to subdue Lewis and finally kill him. An 11th grade tool? Only when he personally faced this Dao talisman did Ji Yunan realize how powerful it was. Daoist Spirit Yang seemed to have expected Ji Yunan to do this. He was not surprised at all. He said calmly, "That's right. This is a treasure left behind by a senior. I obtained it by chance when I was young." Daoist Spirit Yang himself was between 8th grade and 9th grade. He had relied on this Dao talisman to kill the 10th grade darkness god. Now, he had also relied on this Dao talisman to block Ji Yunan's attack. If he did not have this trump card, why would he dare to persuade Ji Yunan to turn back? Unfortunately, it's too late. Ji Yunan shook his head. "I can't kill you, but I can watch over you." As he spoke, he waved his hand calmly. A pitch-black shadow wrapped around the blue light screen and sent Daoist Spirit Yang out of the plane. Above the endless void, the atmosphere started to change as Song Fei's expression turned gloomy. It was Zhu Jiming's first time seeing Song Fei so emotional. He could not help but ask in confusion, "What happened?" "Something happened to Yayan too." Song Fei glanced at the 2 lords coldly and said without hiding anything. He had Shi Yayan's divine soul fragment, so he could sense the latter's condition immediately. But just now, the divine soul fragment suddenly shattered. The last message that was transmitted was that Shi Yayan's divine soul had been cut into countless pieces and there was no possibility of revival. The 2 lords also heard Song Fei's words. The Lord of Nightmares turned around immediately and looked at the War Lord Eugene beside him. "Why are you looking at me? I didn't do it." Eugene roared angrily. When Kusis heard this news, he immediately thought of 2 people. One was the beast god of his own camp, and the other was Eugene. Both of them were warmongers who wanted to see the world in chaos. "Lord Song Fei, we will give you an explanation for this matter," Kusis quickly said, but he was not very confident. Even he could not be sure if this was done by one of his own. Or rather, he was almost certain that it was done by one of his own. The only difference was whether there was any way to salvage the situation. It was not like the disciple of another had come to the Pantheon world to commit suicide. Song Fei was silent for a while, then said coldly, "All right, I'll wait for this explanation." Chapter 439. After Song Fei left in a huff, the Pantheon world quickly went into investigation mode and invited Song Fei to supervise the progress of the investigation to show that they were not hiding anything. What surprised them was that Song Fei rejected the invitation and asked Zhu Jiming to supervise instead. Maybe he's too sad and unwilling to face reality. Zhu Jiming found a lousy excuse and brushed off the Pantheon world. He wanted nothing more than to lead the negotiations. Song Fei was the scapegoat anyway. No matter what they agreed to, they could just say that it was Song Fei who agreed to it. It was not difficult to investigate the cause of Shi Yayan's death. After all, after he came to the Pantheon world, all his actions were clearly visible. The lords did not have to spend much effort to follow the clues. They found Sophia, LV Jialiang was taken away for killing Brooke, and disappeared while pursuing Andy and the rest. The location of Shi Yan's death was also found. It was deep in the void, where the gluttony god kingdom was. Was it Fagman? Eugene's gaze fell on the void as he said in a low voice. Even though it was a question, there was a certain certainty in his tone. After all, Shi Yan's god's soul was shredded. This was too obvious. Moreover, Shi Yan himself was equivalent to a level 9 god. Other than Fagman, who was nearby, who else could kill him? It's possible. The Lord of Nightmares did not hide Zhu Jiming's existence and nodded. But if it wasn't Fagman, this matter is complicated. Everyone involved was dead. There was not enough information to determine if the truth was as it seemed, or if there was someone else behind the scenes. If there was someone behind the scenes, it was indeed possible. After all, the whole thing seemed too coincidental, but there was no evidence to prove it. Without any evidence, could they use a guess as an explanation to Song Fei? All the evidence pointed to Fagman, but in the end, no one was caught red-handed. Taking down a level 9 god on their side just like that was also unjustifiable. Both Eugene and Kotsis felt that this was a tricky situation. Let's find Fagman first and see what he has to say. Kotsis rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Eugene agreed. On the other hand, Zhu Jiming crossed his arms confidently and waited for the two lords to express their stance. Although his final attitude was not to start a war, he still had to use basic negotiation skills. However, the three of them did not expect that someone had already made the choice for them. Just as the three of them stepped into the gluttony divine kingdom, the plane they were in suddenly began to collapse without any warning. The originally blue sky was quickly dyed red, the stars began to fall, and the earth began to crack. Could this be? Zhu Jiming didn't have a deep understanding of the god nation, but such an obvious sign made him understand something. Fagman is dead, the Lord of Nightmares said in a deep voice. He stepped into the deepest part of the gluttony divine kingdom and saw Fagman's corpse lying there quietly. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically, and he turned to look at Zhu Jiming. Zhu Jiming was a step behind. He was still in a confused state until he saw a ruler stuck in the chest of the corpse on the ground. It was Song Fei's ruler. The corners of Zhu Jiming's mouth twitched. His body had already moved at the first instant, but his will was slightly distracted. Dream force had already descended upon him. Before he was sucked into the dream, Zhu Jiming's last thought was, "Song Fei, you tricked me." 3 days later, the news spread throughout the two worlds. Song Fei, who had come to the Pantheon world to negotiate, had personally killed Fagman to vent his anger because his prized disciple, Shi Yan, had been killed by the god of gluttony. He had even left his ruler behind as proof. This was in line with Song Fei's style. He had always done things openly, and would never hide anything. He would never deny that he had killed someone. However, it was also from that day onwards that the negotiations between the two sides had officially broken down, and war between the two worlds was imminent. After hearing the news, Taoist Master Spirit's son could not help but laugh involuntarily as he said to Ji Yunan, "Song Fei is really straightforward. I'm afraid Zhu Jiming is going to be screwed over by him." Taoist Master Spirit's son had been in charge of the Shenqing world for many years, and had also been the chief steward of the Empyrean Society for so long. Naturally, he had a good understanding of the 13 skies. Song Fei had obviously asked Zhu Jiming to hold back the opposing lords, while he chose to start the war himself. This was equivalent to selling Zhu Jiming out. Although the martial soldier Star Lord wouldn't immediately perish against the hostile overgods, the extent of his injuries would depend on how many overgods he would be injured. Zhu Jiming will be dissatisfied with this war no matter what. It's better to let him recuperate from his injuries for a few thousand years. Taoist Master Spirit's son seemed to have a unique understanding of the game between path-fusing masters. Ji Yunan was standing beside him, smiling faintly at him. "Let's stop chatting for 13 days. Tell me, how much longer can you hold on?" The two of them were now in an unknown small plain. This place was uninhabited, and there was no native civilization. It was a very remote area. The blue light surrounding Taoist Master Spirit's son was much dimmer than it had been before, and it seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Ever since Ji Yunan had brought him out of the depths of the void, Taoist Master Spirit Sun had not had any opportunity to escape. Ji Nan kept a close eye on him until the power of the Tao Talisman was about to be exhausted. If Taoist Master Spirit Sun had enough time to prepare, he could even use this Tao Talisman to kill a level 10 expert. Unfortunately, Ji Nan did not give him the time. He had to use all the power of the Tao Talisman for defense. What good will killing me do you? Taoist Master Spirit Sun looked at Ji Nan calmly, as if he was not talking about killing himself. Ji Nan did not answer him, and only looked at the Tao Talisman in his hand. Taoist Master Spirit Sun seemed to understand something. He smiled faintly and shook his head. Then, he suddenly slapped the top of his head. With this slap, the blue light suddenly disappeared, and Taoist Master Spirit Sun's body froze at the same time. Then, as a cool breeze blew past, he turned into dust and scattered in the air. Ji Nan frowned and slowly walked forward, only to find that all of Taoist Master Spirit Sun's clothes, belongings, and even the Tao Talisman had disappeared without a trace. It seemed that they had also dissipated with the wind. A cicada shedding its carapace? Ji Nan revealed a thoughtful look. Taoist Master Spirit Sun was not simple. He had always known this, but he did not expect that this person had so many tricks up his sleeve. However, he did not take it to heart. He wanted to make Taoist Master Spirit Sun stay, but now he just wanted to see the Tao Talisman. Now that the war between the two worlds was inevitable, whether Taoist Master Spirit Sun escaped or not was no longer important. He also did not think that Taoist Master Spirit Sun would run to expose him. To put it bluntly, there was no evidence, and it was too late to talk about it now. I have to hurry back. Ji Nan muttered to himself. Chapter 440. The Heavenly Worlds. When Ji Nan returned, there was a huge piece of news. Shi Daotian raised the banner of declaring war on the Pantheon world and received the support of a group of minor Starlords. Martial Soldier, on the other hand, withdrew from the war unilaterally. Among the Starlords who are world rank and above, he is more popular. Red Tail reported the situation to Ji Nan. This was not a secret, and it was the biggest topic in the Heavenly Worlds. Shi Daotian claimed that the Pantheon world was ambitious, and had long planned to start a war, so they had to face them head-on. Martial Soldier accused Shi Daotian of starting a war for his own personal grudge, and that he had coerced most of the people. There was even news that Lord Zhu Jiming of the 13 Heavens had personally gone to Shi Daotian to reason with Song Fei, and the two parted on bad terms. If we weren't in Shi Daotian, we might have fought. Ji Nan shook his head and laughed. Song Fei had caused Zhu Jiming to be besieged by the lords, and the grudge between the two had been formed. Unless there was another situation where their interests were aligned, there would be no possibility of them working together. Song Fei probably understood this, so he had decisively hidden in his astral plane after returning. Although the astral plane did not affect the Starlord as much after fusing with the Heavenly Worlds, there would still be some support. On the other hand, Zhu Jiming's injuries in the Pantheon world were not light, and if they really fought, the outcome would be uncertain. Of course, the Starlords below would not know the truth of what had happened in the Pantheon world. Red Tail had no intention of asking, and said directly, "Then, Lord, we, of course, will stand on Shi Daotian's side." Ji Nan said without hesitation. Although we have some grudges, in the face of the Heavenly World's survival, personal grudges can be put aside. These words were spoken with righteousness, and the corners of Red Tail's mouth twitched. He nodded and said, "Understood, I'll arrange it." The war was imminent, and the entire Heavenly Worlds entered a state of preparation. Of course, the most proactive was Shi Daotian's forces. Shi Daotian had every reason to be furious. After all, 2 of Song Fei's disciples had died at the hands of despicable gods. An eye for an eye must be paid. After Shi Yan's death, even if there were still people who didn't want to start a war, they had no reason to blame Song Fei. As for Shi Daotian, he decided to be the vanguard of the attack on the Pantheon world. Not only did he send out a large number of experts to lead the charge, but he also issued a summons to the entire Pantheon. They hoped to unite the strong and coordinate them so that they could unleash the greatest power of the universe. Lu Wen had actually done something similar when he had fought against the master god of time, Bran. Back then, Lu Wen had been moved by benefits. Now, Song Fei was the same. For those young Star-Lords who wanted to obtain divinity cores but lacked connections, this was the perfect opportunity. With Shi Daotian vouching for them, they could avoid any internal strife, and they did not have to worry about the distribution of the spoils of war. A large number of Star-Lords started to gather at Shi Daotian. Some people even called Shi Daotian's order Hunting God Order. It meant that these people were all here for hunting God. Of course, the officials of Shi Daotian wouldn't admit this, but the name God Hunting token still spread and was widely known. What did you say? Ji Yunan also accepted the God Hunting token? Fang Chaoyun was handling the matters at hand. When he heard a disciple's hurried report, he immediately raised his head. After hearing the grievous news of his second junior brother's death, this old master Fang, who hated evil, volunteered to go to Shi Daotian to assist his master in handling matters. Currently, he was in charge of reviewing and distributing the foreign Star-Lords. Most of the foreign Star-Lords did not need to be reviewed. They had no reason to stop those who were willing to contribute to the Pantheon. More importantly, the distribution and registration were to prevent them from betraying their own people. Yes. That disciple was Fang Chaoyun's personal disciple, which was equivalent to Song Fei's disciple. At this moment, he was wiping away the cold sweat on his face. When the subordinates received his information, they did not dare to delay and sent it directly to me. Fang Chaoyun nodded silently. After some thought, he said, Ji Yunan and I have a grudge, and he is also a member of the Divine God Society. Then should we reject him? That disciple hurriedly interjected. He could not wait to draw a clear line between himself and a scourge like Ji Yunan. However, Fang Chaoyun glared at him and said, on what grounds? Personal grudges cannot affect the greater good. Since Ji Yunan is willing to contribute to the Pantheon, how can we reject him? That disciple angrily agreed. In his heart, he thought, Master, it's all because you are talking too much. Fang Chaoyun said again, there is no need to give him special treatment. Just treat him as an ordinary Realm Star Lord. How many Realm Star Lords and above are willing to participate in the war? Shi Daotian did not lack young Star Lords. Thus, their most important task was to rope in those Realm and Heaven Star Lords to participate in the war. The disciple said without hesitation, excluding Ji Yunan, there are currently 6 Realm Star Lords and 2 Heaven Star Lords. This number referred to those who were originally neutral but had been roped in by Shi Daotian's faction. However, Fang Chaoyun still frowned. It is far from enough. The other party has gathered the strength of the entire world. We are too few. That disciple did not dare to reply and could only remain silent. After a while, Fang Chaoyun spoke again. Now that the gods have gathered at the front lines, we are weak. That is all the more reason for us to take the initiative to attack. Ji Yunan sat calmly in the front hall, waiting for the disciple to return. He did not look embarrassed at all. On the contrary, he was accompanied by a few of Shi Daotian's disciples. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Fortunately, the disciple who went to report came back quickly. He came before Ji Yunan and said respectfully, Lord Ji Yunan, Master has agreed to let you join the battle team. Please follow me to register. Ji Yunan did not mind. After registering his name with the young disciple, another person appeared. It was Lin Huan, the Pure Grace Heaven Direct disciple who had reported to Fang Chaoyun earlier. Lin Huan led Ji Yunan to sit down. He then smiled and said, Sir Ji Yunan's willingness to come to Shi Daotian is indeed beyond Master's expectations. However, Master has said that personal grievances should not affect the greater good. What do you want me to do? Ji Yunan did not have any intention of talking to him and asked directly. Lin Huan's mouth twitched. Considering that the other party was an expert who could fight against Master, he suppressed his anger. We will provide 2 places for Star Lords who are willing to join the battle, Lin Huan said. Participate in the frontal battle and accept our orders. Alternatively, you can form your own team and directly invade the world of gods to hunt and kill. I choose the second option, Ji Yunan said without hesitation. Lin Huan nodded slowly. This was within his expectations. If Ji Yunan was willing to accept orders, he would have to go back and ask Master. However, He then stood up and said, "Of course, that is not a problem. However, we have a presumptuous request. What is it?" Ji Yunan looked at him doubtfully. Chapter 441. Shi Daotian wanted Ji Yunan to hide his identity. Ji Yunan did not understand what that meant, but when he realized it, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. In other words, they did not want him to join the fight, but they did not want him to join the fight and cause a controversy. Ji Yunan did not plan on arguing with them over such a small matter, so he quickly agreed to it. He was not a rebellious person, and he did not like to go against people. In fact, Ji Yunan really did need to join Shi Daotian's camp to hide his goal of being hunter god. After all, with Ji Yunan's fame, everything he did was watched. If he suddenly went to the front lines to kill a god, people would think he was up to something. If he joined Shi Daotian's camp, hunter god would be justified. Even if people suspected him, they would first suspect if he was plotting against Shi Daotian or Fang Chaoyun. They would not think about hunter god. After all, for a world star lord like him, recruiting world breakers was not difficult. It was strange for him to go out of his way for a god's personality. "Mr. Ji Yunan, your hunting mission has been accepted." In front of Ji Yunan, a clear female voice spoke. A series of mission information was assigned, including the target, the best place to hunt, the danger, and the difficulty. This was a rule creature that Shi Daotian had created at the last minute. It was used for the strategic planning of this war. For a war between two worlds, it was only natural that Shi Daotian would create a detailed mission distribution system. Ji Yunan's mission target was a level 7 god. The information he was given was based on a normal world star lord, so the target assigned to him was a level lower. Otherwise, hunter god would not know who was hunting who. But a level 7 god was not enough to satisfy Ji Yunan's appetite. Didn't he spend so much effort just to kill the gods in broad daylight? Increase the target's level. After the command was entered, the blue light in front of Ji Yunan flashed. After a while, the details of the mission were displayed again. This time, it was a level 8 god. Increase the target's level. Ji Yunan didn't even look at it as he entered another command. The blue light flickered even more intensely, but this time, Ji Yunan didn't have to wait too long. He immediately threw out a scroll of information. Ji Yunan lowered his head to take a look and finally revealed a satisfied smile. The 9th god, Snow Goddess Claudia. In a small hall near the location of the mission, a man and a woman were sitting quietly. They were the heaven-grade star lords that Shi Daotian could find. The man was holding a cup of tea in his hand and was sipping it unhurriedly. Meanwhile, the woman's face was clearly filled with irritation and impatience. 4 powerhouses of their level, this was a rare occurrence. One of them was the Dark North Sky's Yang Yang, and the other was the 100 Nether Sky's Yu Yi Fei. They were both heaven-grade starry lords, and logically speaking, they should be able to hide their emotions. However, Yu Yi Fei was a special case. She was originally a world breaker who inherited the 100 Nether Sky from the previous starry lord. This kind of experience could definitely be called reaching the heavens in a single step. However, no matter how amazing Yu Yi Fei was, jumping from level 4 to the peak of Dao integration was still a bit too big. Just stabilizing her cultivation base and settling the chaos in the star world took her 1,000 years. Even now, she hadn't completely digested the previous starry lord's inheritance. The 100 Nether Sky was originally a large plane that was close to level 10, but now it was only level 9. The damage was not small. However, this was the usual practice of the star world's inheritance. At least she didn't directly drop out of the heaven grade, so Yu Yi Fei was already a qualified successor. "Didn't you say you found the third person? Is old man Fang trying to trick us?" Yu Yi Fei looked at Yang Yang's calm expression and could only suppress the irritation in her heart. In the information collected by Shi Daotian, Snow Goddess Claudia was the most suitable level 9 god to hunt. However, she was still level 9, so it was impossible for her to find a starry lord of the same level to hunt alone. To ensure safety, at least 3 people had to surround one. That was why the 2 of them were summoned here when the third person appeared. Maybe he was delayed by something. Yang Yang had an unperturbed look on his face as he chuckled. "Little you really have to change your personality. Otherwise, sooner or later, you will suffer because of this. Yu Yifei's impatience was also well known in the circle of starry lords. Although Yang Yang looked young, he was actually several times older than Yu Yifei. No one could say anything about him lecturing her like this. Yu Yifei took a deep breath and tried hard to calm herself down. She was also aware of the flaws in her character. She would not be like this when she was young. It was completely caused by her rushing to catch up with her cultivation base after reaching the heavens in a single step. Perhaps only when she returned to level 10 could she completely get rid of this influence. Just as Yu Yifei was about to speak again, a figure had already appeared behind the two of them. I am the third person. Let's go. A calm voice came from behind, causing the two of them to turn around immediately. One was wrapped in a black robe and did not reveal any aura, making it impossible to determine the other party's identity. However, the other party could silently appear beside the two of them and not be discovered until he spoke. This in itself was enough to explain the problem. Yang Yang and Yu Yifei looked at each other, somewhat puzzled by the other party's action of hiding their identity. The number of people at their level was pitifully small. It was easy to count who was there, so there was no point in hiding. As long as they made a move, there would be no use in hiding. Yang Yang did not take it to heart and nodded. Yu Yifei, on the other hand, was already irritated and could not help but spit out, "Just tell me who you are. What's the use of hiding?" If not for Shi Daotian's great efforts in inheriting 100 Nether Heaven, she would not have bothered to participate in this battle. None of your business. The indifferent reply made Yu Yifei's eyelids twitch. She could not help but sneer, "Fine. If you don't tell me, I'll find out myself." As her voice fell, she had already pushed out her right hand. A quiet blue light flashed, as if it was all contained in her right palm, and quickly fell on the other party's body. As long as the other party used a method to block it, it would not be difficult to find out which law it belonged to. At that time, the range would be directly reduced to a single digit. However, she did not expect that the other party not only did not dodge, but did not even have the intention to block, allowing her palm to hit his body. In Yu Yifei's perception, this palm seemed to hit a wall, like a stone sinking into the sea without an echo. Instead, she suddenly felt a chill on her face, and two concentrated gazes landed on it. Chapter 442. Before Yu Yifei could react to his words, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. All her protective laws were instantly broken, and her body was hit without any resistance. Her whole body flew out. Yang Yang frowned, and with a flash, he appeared behind Yu Yifei, and caught her. Yu Yifei was too close, so she didn't see what happened, but he saw it clearly. That person clearly took Yu Yifei's palm, and instantly kicked out, breaking all the laws, and hit Yu Yifei's body. Pure power. Who could it be? Yang Yang put Yu Yifei aside, and his mind subconsciously turned away. In his memory, there did not seem to be a body cultivator powerhouse of this level, or rather, there were similar people who had their own distinct characteristics when they attacked. Unlike this person, could it be a god? Because of the recent war between the two worlds, Yang Yang's mind immediately came up with this idea. He looked at Yu Yifei again, and the latter also had a similar look. Yu Yifei was kicked by the black-robed man, but because she did not use her full strength, she did not suffer any injuries. In the blink of an eye, the two guessed all the possible targets, but still could not find the corresponding person. Ji Yunan's figure might have turned over in their minds, but was eliminated in the blink of an eye. This could not be blamed on them. After all, the impression that Ji Yunan gave the outside world was that of a junior who had just advanced to world level, and had some mysterious abilities. His advancement to world level had caused too much of a commotion, and although he had fought with Fang Chaoyun, it was just a contest, and he did not show anything else, so others could not judge his strength. If there was a special method that could temporarily fight against a 10th level powerhouse, the two in front of them could also do it. They just needed some time to prepare. Even Fang Chaoyun himself only saw Ji Yunan as an ordinary world level. In the minds of most people, the level of the star realm was the best measure of overall strength. If one was strong in one aspect, there would definitely be shortcomings in another aspect. Any other questions? The black-robed man's calm and indifferent voice sounded. Yu Yifei's gaze was slightly cold, and was about to speak again, but was stopped by Yang. "Let's go," the North Dark Heavenly Star Lord said with a smile. His target this time was the snow goddess Claudia, a true veteran god who was older than many of the main gods. Therefore, there was no such thing as how many generations the snow deity had existed. Since ancient times, she had been the only one. An old undying god. Yang evaluated impolitely. These kinds of existences are usually more afraid of death, but they actually came to take the lead this time. Yu Yefei had clearly done her homework. Her daughter and son-in-law, a couple of gods, were killed by god hunters. "So, you're going to seek revenge? We can start from this." Yang nodded and said. Knowing the target's intentions would undoubtedly allow him to make targeted arrangements and obtain the greatest benefits with the smallest price. In any case, the other party was a level 9 god. Just because he was old did not mean that he was weak, so he had to be taken seriously. Yang and Yu Yefei discussed the countermeasures, as well as the tactics to be set up when they really attacked. Only the black-robed man did not say a word. The three of them had already arrived at the edge of the world and were currently at the front lines. Yang looked at the other party and said, "What do you think?" He originally thought that this person would either give his opinion or continue to pretend to be deep in thought. He didn't expect the other party to speak. No. The corner of Yang's mouth twitched. He finally understood how Yu Yefei felt. Her tone was really asking for a beating. Then how are you going to deal with Snow Goddess? Yu Yefei could not help but sneer. The black-robed man paused for a moment, then turned to look at Yu Yefei, find her and kill her. Normally, Snow Goddess did not have to go through too much trouble. Ever since Shi Daotian's people discovered Claudia's tracks, they did not let her out of their sight. In other words, at the front lines where the two worlds intersect, there was no place for her to hide. Snow Goddess was one of the few high-level gods who went to the front lines at this stage. She was in charge of the preparation work for the front lines. At the same time, she also took on the responsibility of guarding the front lines and preventing ambushes. And if she herself was ambushed, one could imagine that those behind her would also act. "Claudia is down there." Yang stood in the void, looking down at a small plane and said, according to the information given by Shi Daotian, she did not hide herself. Usually. "Hey." Before Yang finished speaking, he saw the black-robed figure beside him jump out, without any intention of discussing with them. Damn it. Yang subconsciously wanted to follow. If they were to be alerted by this guy, then it would be much more difficult for them to successfully hunt the god. This time, it was Yu Yefei who pulled him back. The young female star said with a stern face, "Let him test the waters. If there's really no danger, then we can make our move." As soon as she said that, Yang understood what she meant. The war between the two worlds affected too much, and the Master God could attack at any time. It was better to let the black-robed man take the lead. They were not Shi Daotian's subordinates, so it was not a big deal if they failed to kill him. At most, they would change their target next time, so there was no need to take the risk. Yang stopped in his tracks, but then he became suspicious. That guy doesn't seem to care about this at all. Could he really be a direct descendant of Shi Daotian? How could a direct descendant be sent to die? Yu Yefei laughed coldly and said. Ever since she had taken control of 100 Sky, her relationship with Shi Daotian had become worse and worse. This was unavoidable. In their line of sight, the black-robed man directly landed on the plane from the horizon. A pitch-black great sword suddenly condensed in his hand, and he slashed down heavily. It's not a pure body cultivator. Yu Yefei's heart trembled slightly. She did not expect the opponent's body to be so strong, and his own laws were not related to this. Yang's eyes turned slightly, and his guess about the black-robed man's identity immediately expanded. No matter what the two of them guessed, the black-robed man's movements did not hesitate at all, and he slashed down into the crowd. Just this strike alone had caused the Pantheon world to lose at least 10 legendary powerhouses. Even the gods had been injured by the aftershocks. And after this strike, the black-robed man actually turned around and left without saying a word, as if he had only come for this strike. Just as he turned around, a wave of coldness rose up in the small plane, and snowflakes started to float down from the sky. Claudia finally made her move, wanting to stop the enemy from escaping, but something unexpected happened. The black-robed man actually turned around in an instant and rushed straight towards the center of the snowy area. His entire body sank into the shadows, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Claudia. With a punch, Claudia instantly turned into snowflakes that filled the sky, and actually escaped without saying a word. "You think you can escape?" The black-robed man sneered, and shouted at the two people outside the plane. "Are you two here to watch a show?" Yang Yang and Yu Yefei looked at each other. They really felt like they were watching a show. After seeing the black-robed man use his full strength, if they still could not recognize who he was, then they would be blind. Chapter 443. The black-robed man was Ji Yunan. After seeing the huge shadow sword, it was no longer difficult to distinguish the black-robed man's laws. As for the Star Lord who had the law of shadows and a powerful body, this characteristic was too obvious. It's actually him. He actually helped Shi Daotian. Yu Yefei muttered to herself in disbelief. She had already imagined a bunch of scenes in her mind, such as Ji Yunan being Shi Daotian's chess piece, or that Shi Daotian had arranged for someone to come over, but was intercepted and killed by Ji Yunan. Yang Yang's eyes were also spinning around at the side. It was obvious that after recognizing Ji Yunan's identity, his heart was not calm. No matter how Yu Yefei and Yang Yang guessed, they did not forget the goal of this trip. They immediately descended to the small plain below and surrounded the snowflakes that filled the sky. Ji Yunan had already made a move, but he did not attract the attention of the Master God. This meant that the other party was not paying attention to this side. As long as he killed Claudia, he would be able to complete his mission. They were different from Ji Yunan, who had the heart to hunt gods. These two were invited by Shi Daotian because of their past friendship, so they might not be willing to participate in this matter. Who knew when the other party's Master God would appear, and whether Song Fei would be able to save them? In a battle at that level, it was not strange for mistakes to occur. As soon as the two of them landed in the small plane, they activated their laws to the extreme. A purple and a green light shone from their bodies, quickly destroying all the snowflakes around them. This was one of the abilities of the snow god. She could merge herself into the snowflakes, and as long as a single snowflake could escape, she could be reborn. Snowflakes were much harder to deal with than blood or energy. The essence of snow was water. Even if it was heated and melted, it would at most turn into steam and float in the air. Water molecules were extremely stable structures. To destroy all the water in a certain area, the difficulty could be imagined. Thus, 3 experts of the same level were needed to ensure that Claudia did not escape. Ji Yunan stabbed the shadow sword into the ground, and the black hole-like shadow quickly expanded, sucking in everything it covered, completely crushing it, leaving not a single blade of grass behind. The sky was completely engulfed by Yang Yang's law space. The green lightning wantonly swept across, and even space was directly shattered. Yu Yefei landed on the ground and pressed one hand on the ground. The power from the netherworld began to rage underground. In the blink of an eye, the small plane was riddled with holes under the joint attack of the 3 of them. Even the plane itself was not spared, so Claudia was naturally affected. On the other side of the small plane, Xueshen had transformed back into his human form. He quickly opened up a space crack with a lingering fear in his heart. He wanted to hide in another plane, but he didn't dare to look back. However, Ji Yunan and the other 2 were already prepared, so how could they let her escape? The ground beneath Claudia's feet suddenly cracked open, and a terrifying power that seemed to have come from the depths of hell attacked her, instantly covering her entire body. There was a loud cry in the blue sky, and a monster that looked like a fish or a rock descended from the sky. A tremendous force pressed down on Claudia's head, as if it wanted to completely crush her. Yang Yang and Yu Yefei's cooperation was flawless, instantly sealing off all of Claudia's escape routes. In the true sense of the word, there was no way out. And just as this Xueshen was resisting with all her might, trying to escape from the intersecting attacks of the 2, a shadow had already appeared behind her. Claudia completely did not expect that under such a double attack, there would still be someone who dared to sneak up behind her. Even if he attacked her, did he not consider how he would escape? Reality was not a game. There was no such thing as forming a team. Attacks from the sky and from the ground were something that everyone had to bear. So it was only when the shadow sword suddenly thrust out, piercing straight into Claudia's back and coming out from her chest, that Shueishan suddenly turned her head. Before she could say a word, Ji Yunan's fist had already smashed onto Claudia's head, causing it to explode. Golden blood splattered out, but was instantly evaporated by the boiling power of heaven and earth. Even Claudia's corpse, after losing the support of her own power of law, was completely engulfed in the blink of an eye, leaving not a single trace behind. On the contrary, Yang Yang and Yu Yefei, who were outside, were slightly startled when they saw this scene, and hurriedly stopped the attacks in their hands. Even they did not expect that Ji Yunan would actually be so unyielding to this extent, forcefully withstanding the attacks of the two. He still wanted to kill Claudia on the spot. After a moment, they saw Ji Yunan's figure slowly appear in the messy plain ruins, and calmly walked in front of the two. Being attacked by two Stage 9 experts at the same time, moreover, it was a law attack that had been prepared for a long time, it still caused quite a bit of damage to Ji Yunan. His body was covered by the power of the netherworld, and his entire body seemed to have been scrubbed. There was not a single piece of skin on his body that was intact. His head was suppressed by the Kuan Peng Dharma, and the enormous power created by the law directly broke his neck. Now it was twisted in a circle and a half, looking at the two from an oblique angle. "Let's go." Ji Yunan did not care about this little injury at all, and casually said to the two of them. Claudia was already dead, there was no doubt about this, because Ji Yunan's sin value had already reached his account. This veteran Stage 9 god had provided Ji Yunan with nearly 10,000 sin value, and now his sin value had already exceeded 25,000 points, not far from the Stage 9. But this time, Ji Yunan's goal was not the Stage 9, but to directly farm enough sin value for the Stage 10, which was a little far from this goal. According to the conversion of levels, he roughly needed the sin value of 3 Stage 10 gods to reach the standard of the Stage 10, and if it was converted to Stage 9 gods, he would probably need 9 to 10. Ji Yunan's tone was very calm, but Yang Yang and Yu Yefei had a strange feeling. They knew very well what kind of injuries Ji Yunan had suffered, which was why they felt even more terrified. After suffering such injuries, how could he still act as if nothing had happened? They also noticed that the injuries on Ji Yunan's body, which were washed by the power of the netherworld, were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and new flesh and skin were growing rapidly, as if he had never been injured. Even his head, which was twisted at a weird angle, was personally straightened by Ji Yunan when he spoke. However, the broken vertebrae were obviously not fully grown yet, so the head could only hang limply on the neck, unnaturally crooked. Yang Yang coughed lightly and said, "Since the target has been taken care of, let's hurry up and leave, lest we be targeted by the Lord." Yu Yefei also nodded. Such a big movement here would undoubtedly attract attention soon. Instead, it was Ji Yunan who waved his hand and said, "Claudia is dead, no Lord will come, but it is true that we should leave early." Chapter 444. After saying that, Ji Yunan took the lead and left. He didn't intend to explain further. Yang Yang and Yu Yefei looked at each other, knowing that Ji Yunan definitely knew some inside information. However, if he did not want to say it, they would not take the initiative to ask. After all, they did not have the obligation to exchange information. The two of them also did not mention Ji Yunan's identity. They even decided to pretend that they did not know after returning. Ji Yunan had concealed his identity to help Shi Daotian. No matter what the reason was, he clearly did not want outsiders to know. If they leaked it, they would undoubtedly receive revenge from Ji Yunan and even Shi Daotian. It was better to avoid trouble, as long as they were clear about it. Ji Yunan did not pay attention to these two teammates. He knew that after this battle, the two of them would most likely not participate in the war between the two worlds. Among the high-level experts, there were not many who were willing to act. Otherwise, they would not have chosen this kind of hunting operation. Within Shi Daotian, the news of Claudia's death quickly reached Fang Chaoyun's ears. It was Lin Huan who personally came to report. Yang Yang and Yu Yefei, the two seniors, have already returned to the astral world, Lin Huan reported. However, that Ji Yunan is asking if there are any new targets. Two short-sighted people, Fang Chaoyun said disdainfully. Then he said, Ji-Yunan's actions are always unpredictable, but if he wants to help us kill gods, there is no need for us to stop him. We will just give him a target. However, Lin Huan smiled bitterly and said, Master, the problem now is that we don't have any more targets to kill. How can that be? Fang Chaoyun frowned. We know the whereabouts of at least 200 gods. Is there no suitable target? Lin Huan stammered, Ji-Yunan, he wants to kill a rank 9 god alone. When they returned to the All Heavens, Shi Daoqian's message was that there were no suitable targets, and he asked Ji-Yunan to wait patiently. Ji-Yunan could not help but shake his head, but he knew that this was normal. Major gods were no fools. Who would run to the front lines and become a target before the real battle had even begun? It was the same for the All Heavens realms. Most of the troops gathered at the front lines were ordinary troops. Claudia was just a special case. The information Shi Daoqian found about her daughter and son-in-law was just a cover. Ji-Yunan, on the other hand, knew very well why the snow goddess had come to the front line. She and Lorenza were enemies, and they had a very deep grudge against each other. After Lorenza became a main god, Claudia had been hiding, afraid that the current Lord of Flowers would come after her. Maybe Lorenza didn't have the time to deal with Claudia in the beginning, but she wouldn't let go of this opportunity this time. Claudia must have been forced out by Lorenza. The next time he wanted to hunt down a high-level god, he would have to wait until the war officially started and find an opportunity amidst the chaos. The sin value represented by the gods was related to their levels. The difference between each level was about 1 to 3. However, the higher the level, the higher the ratio. When the real war started, Ji-Yunan planned to hunt down the low-level gods first, push the sin value to a higher level, and then attack the high-level gods, completing the accumulation in one fell swoop. This was mainly because if he hunted down the high-level gods at the beginning of the war, it would easily attract the attention of the main gods. If he was noticed by the main gods at the beginning, as Ji-Yunan's sin value increased, he might be noticed. After all, when the sin value reached level 9 or even level 10, the characteristics of an evil god would begin to appear. Sir, the new target has been chosen. Red Tail walked into the evil god's temple and reported to Ji-Yunan. The new target she was talking about was naturally the astral plane. He had to hunt for sin value, and he couldn't let go of the points either. He had to grab both. Even though the real kingdom war would only start after Ji-Yunan collected all the sin value, the preparations for the war had to start now to ensure that it could start at any time. According to the standard calculation of the Dao sect plane, it would only take about 1.5 Dao sect planes for Ji-Yunan to advance to level 10. However, the so-called 1.5 was a little awkward. The Dao sect plane was already one of the more powerful astral planes among the planes. Even the first echelon like the bone plane couldn't reach the level of 1.5 Dao sect planes. However, if two kingdom wars were to be organized, things would become uncontrollable. After all, the background now was the war between the two planes. Shi Daoqian wouldn't sit back and watch as the heavens fell into chaos. When that time came, let alone Fang Chaoyun, even Song Fei might directly take action. Therefore, the best way was to find a heaven-level plane to attack. The kingdom wars were nearing the end. As long as he had enough points, it didn't matter if he sacrificed all the god's servants, including the oracles. When such a tactical plan was brought out, the cabinet quickly chose a target. Magnificent heaven? Ji-Yunan's brows raised slightly, and he seemed to be slightly surprised. The magnificent heaven's star master was the Grand Sage Immortal Empress. She was one of the weakest of the heaven-level planes. Her position was also inherited, and her strength might not even be comparable to Yu Yefei's. No matter how many competitors she defeated, no matter how scheming and shrewd this woman was, power couldn't come from nowhere. What surprised Ji-Yunan was that the target was the magnificent heaven. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress was a member of the Heavenly God Society, and a core member at that. If he attacked the magnificent heaven, it was basically the same as turning against the Heavenly God Society. That's right. Red Tail nodded. The cabinet's evidence is that not long ago, imperial qi leaked out in the magnificent heaven, which led to secession in various places. The Grand Sage Immortal Empress spent a lot of effort to quell the disputes in the astral plane. Now that the imperial chi in the magnificent heaven has dropped, it's the best time to invade. Ji Nan continued to read the dossier, and immediately discovered that the magnificent heaven was indeed a special astral plane. The imperial chi was a unique existence that only existed in the magnificent heaven. The amount of power a Star Master could obtain from the astral plane depended on the amount of imperial chi in the dynasty, which was slightly different from other astral planes. More importantly, the Star Master couldn't attack her own people. Plundering the imperial chi had to follow the rule of the king doesn't see the king, so the decapitation tactic couldn't be used. It's indeed a good place. After reading the dossier, Ji Nan couldn't help but smile. The magnificent heaven was indeed a good place to attack. With such a suitable target in front of him, Ji Nan didn't care about turning against the Heavenly God Society. To be precise, he wasn't afraid of turning against anyone. Chapter 445. The war had begun. When both sides thought they were prepared, the war would inevitably break out. It would not change anyone's will. Both sides had a clear goal, not for territory, not for resources, just to kill. The astral lords were after the divinity within the gods, and the gods were after the divinity, just to protect it. Only by hurting the astral lords could they stop the god hunt. Of course, mortal armies were also necessary. Regardless of whether it was a god or a star lord, they were usually people who couldn't be found at all. Why would they obediently wait in one place for you to kill them? Only by using mortal armies to invade the corresponding planes could they determine the location of these people. That was why a mortal war had already begun. For example, Ji Nan had obtained the traces of many gods from Shi Daotian. He had obtained them by sacrificing the lives of countless mortals. When the astral lords and gods entered the war on a large scale, the rhythm of the war began to change. The mortal armies on both sides were no longer patrolling and restraining. Instead, they constantly invaded the target planes, destroying and plundering to force out the important figures of the other side. After all, a war of this level was very different from a mortal war. Mortals could not threaten the astral lords. They could only help from the side, with the goal of weakening the other side's planes. That was why the final situation was that hundreds of astral lords would either act alone or attack in groups. It looked like a plate of loose sand, but with Shi Daotian in the middle, there was a hidden secret. The world of gods had something similar, but it was generally on the defensive. The reason was simple. The main force of the all heavens were the low-tier astral lords, and their subordinates. They were the ones who needed the divinity the most. They only needed to obtain one divinity to create a dozen world breakers, and they would quickly join the war. In comparison, the world of gods did not have the concept of time flow, so the efficiency of nurturing legendary powerhouses was too low. They had to rely on the oracles of the gods. Frontlines, Fire Tillen. Fire Tillen was the border between two worlds. It was one of the largest plains in the world of gods. Many gods and mortal armies had gathered there. In a sense, Fire Tillen was the frontline command center of the world of gods. It coordinated most of the frontlines, as well as the deployment of personnel. On this day, however, the atmosphere in Fel Tillen's conference of gods was solemn. 4 more gods fell yesterday, which means that our opponents have at least 40 more legends. A blonde middle-aged man knocked on the table. Everyone, we can't go on like this. This person was the god of Night's Wane, a newly promoted 8th grade deity. However, he was already one of the higher grade deities in the frontline command. What else can we do? Let's ask for reinforcements from above. The enemy's numbers can be constantly replenished, but we can only fight with fewer and fewer people. A young man at the side curled his lips. If we continue to fight like this, it will be too late once the divine envoys are exhausted and affect our own strength. That's right, we should have asked them for help earlier. The gods at the meeting discussed animatedly, all of them intending to invite the high-level gods to assist them in killing the enemy's Star Master. After all, if they used their god envoys to fight against the Breakworld fighters, they would be able to deal with them in a short amount of time. If they lost too many god envoys, it would weaken their own power. The god envoys themselves were the most devout believers, and they would receive a small portion of the god's power. Every death was a great loss. Wayne listened to the discussion in silence, not knowing what to say. Even the people at the meeting had lost their confidence, and they only wanted the high-level gods to intervene. It was obvious how dire the situation had become. Wayne knew the reason for all of this very well. There were two reasons. One was that Claudia had died not long ago, which made the high-level gods not dare to step onto the front line. The other reason was even simpler. Wayne looked down at the information on the table. Of the 4 gods who had died yesterday, 3 had died at the hands of ghosts. That damned spectre, the 16th space jump point in the gap between the 2 worlds. The armies of the worlds were coming like a tide, trying to take over this place in one fell swoop. The space jump point was the best place to enter the Great World. By passing through the space barrier, the risk would be reduced to the minimum. It was also a place that had to be fought over in the war between the 2 worlds. After all, if a small number of people sneaked in, they did not need to worry about the problem of the jump point. However, if a large number of people wanted to enter, they could not just pick a random place. The individual power of the ordinary army was not enough. If they did not pass through the jump point, the cost of the journey would be astronomical. Shameless invaders. In the name of Lord Tarak, I will dispel the evil. A blonde girl in full armor floated in the air. The tower shield in her hand shone with a golden light, blocking hundreds of enemies. The attacks from the inside could easily pass through the golden light and cause a lot of damage. Julie was an apostle of shield god Tarak. She had been ordered to come to the 16th space jump point to defend against the evil invaders. As a genius girl who had successfully entered the gate of the legendary realm at the age of 19, Julie had the right to be proud. She was confident that any evil would be destroyed by the holy light. However, only after coming to the front line did Julie realize how difficult life was. The enemy was not only evil, but also cunning and far stronger than she had imagined. Legendary elites who were as strong as her, or even stronger, rushed forward as if they did not need money. They did not care about their lives at all. She did not know that these created world breakers were the direct descendants of the planet masters. They did not care about their lives. Perhaps there was an agreement that they would fight for a certain amount of time in exchange for a chance to break the world. Otherwise, it would not have been their turn so easily. Outside the golden light, the ordinary people were quickly killed. The legendary elites all ran away. Not a single one of them was injured. Julie could not help but hate herself. She hated that she did not learn a large-scale killing divine skill. That way, she could have killed these despicable invaders. When the god power that Julie had summoned was exhausted, the tower shield in her hand began to fade. It was like an endless number of enemies were closing in on her again. Julie looked forward with despair. The emptiness of having used up all of her power made her feel like she could not stand straight. My lord. Is this the end? The girl used the last of her strength to recite the name of the god in her heart. She closed her eyes and waited for death to come. In the sky, there seemed to be a sigh. Then, an endless amount of golden light fell. It blocked all the invaders from the worlds and even destroyed them. Chapter 446. It's a god. Let's go. Our mission is complete. Everyone. The moment the gold light appeared, the world breakers from all the worlds started to flee. Their movements were faster than the last. In fact, they were also very clear that their strategic intention was to force the enemy gods out. Then, the Star Lords would naturally deal with them. It was not their task. Because of that line of thought, the number of Breakworld people who died under that attack was not as many as one would have thought. In Julie's eyes, there were a lot of legendary elites. They strictly followed the rule of gathering no more than 10 people. That was to ensure that hunting god would profit. Of those who were instantly killed by Talak, only 2 were unable to dodge in time. The others had already fled. The blonde girl opened her eyes in shock. She realized she was surrounded by an endless gold light. The enemies around her were gone. Miracle. This is the miracle that Father and the others talked about. Julie's face was full of tears. She could not help but kneel and pay her respects. At this time, the gold light in the sky seemed to be stopped by something. It suddenly stopped moving and then disappeared. It was like it had never been there. This is Julie looked up in disbelief. In the sky, all the gold light was collapsing toward a single point. In the blink of an eye, the golden light seemed to have been completely devoured, and the black dot also disappeared at the same time as the golden light dissipated. Julie suddenly had a feeling of emptiness in her heart. It was as if something had disappeared, or as if her faith had suddenly lost its source of support. This young believer had not experienced her faith collapsing. If she had, she would have realized she could no longer use God power. After that, a few shadows gathered there. There were 2 men and 1 woman. What bad luck. Someone stole it again. Who is so evil? This god was lured out because one of the world breakers died, an old man in a black robe cursed. He looked like a ghost. According to the rules of the worlds, whoever lured out the god's personality would belong to them. Stealing was a despicable act no matter the situation. Old Yin, stop complaining, the woman next to him said angrily. The woman at the side said angrily, 1 of us died and 3 of us were injured. How are we going to compensate for this loss? The other man did not lose a break world, so he felt better. He laughed and said, you too. If this was in the past, losing a break world would have been enough to make you feel bad for 20 years. The 2 of them glared at him but didn't say anything. That was because the man was right. For people like them who had just become little Star-Lords, if they had a break world follower, they would treat it like a treasure. They would not dare send it to the battlefield. It was only now that he had the God Hunter technique that he dared to be so extravagant. That's enough. The ghostly old man waved his hand and said, let's hurry up and retreat. Don't attract the high-level deities here. The other 2 naturally had no objections, but the woman thought for a moment and said, wait, go check if the Godhead is still there. I heard from a friend that there's a specter on the battlefield recently that specializes in hunting gods but doesn't take their divinity. Old Yin Ghost couldn't help but sneer, there's such a person? Killing a god but not taking their divinity, is it a pleasure to help others? He didn't move at all. It was obvious that he didn't believe it. The man next to him didn't believe it either, but at least his friend had said it, so he didn't lose anything by taking a look. He waved his hand and opened Talak's body. Then, he had a look of disbelief on his face. There really is a Godhead. Old Yin Ghost suddenly turned his head, and his eyes almost popped out. He stared at the shield god's body, which was shining with a golden light. The woman next to him couldn't believe it either. She mumbled, there really is a specter. Near the 16th space jump point, Ji Nan reappeared with an indescribable smile on his face. Shield god Talak was only a level 7 deity, and he had the upper hand. If he touched him, he would die. There was no way he could fight back. That's the 3rd one today. Time to call it a day, Ji Nan said to himself as he looked at his sin points. After a few days of hunting, his sin points had reached 39,000, which was more than what he had gained from killing a level 9 deity. The number of deities that had died in his hands had exceeded 10, and all of them were low-level deities. To ensure that he didn't attract attention, Ji Nan set a rule that he wouldn't attack more than 3 times a day. As long as he didn't attack too frequently, he wouldn't be noticed for the time being. As for leaving the Godheads behind, that was something Ji Nan had done on purpose. Compared to being killed by others, an unexpected surprise was easier to conceal and wouldn't spread too quickly. The astral lords weren't fools. Who knew if the specter would attack again after everyone knew about it? Even if they were to bet on luck, they wouldn't publicize the existence of the specter. After killing the shield god, Ji Nan returned to the Heaven's Sanctum. If Fel Tillen was the frontline command center of the Pantheon world, then the Heaven's Sanctum had a similar position. Although the Heaven's Sanctum wasn't too big, there were many powerhouses gathered here. Its location was also rather important, and it was undoubtedly favored by the Astral Lords. Even in the Heaven's Sanctum, the Astral Lords had formed some places for mutual exchange. Ji Nan's figure slowly appeared, and he walked into a dimly lit underground bar. He didn't reveal his face, and his pitch-black cloak concealed his identity. A bartender walked up and was about to call Ji Nan's order, but his expression changed when he saw his attire. He said respectfully, "Lord Blackrobe, are you going downstairs as well?" Open the door." Ji Nan nodded and said coldly. The bartender acknowledged and turned around, leading Ji Nan to a wall. He reached out and pushed lightly, and the wall suddenly flipped over, sending Ji Nan and the astral lord to the other side, along with the floor. There was a lady who was already in front, and when she saw the person behind her, she couldn't help but smile. Black robe. It's been a while since you've been here. Ji Nan glanced at her. This was the young astral lord he had met before, so he smiled and said, I'm here to take a look. There were quite a few similar astral lord gathering places, and Ji Nan took turns visiting them. Ji Nan's attitude was very cold, but the lady didn't mind. She continued, someone's auctioning a level 7 guard hood today. Are you interested? He's selling a level 7 guard hood. He's very rich. Ji Nan didn't answer her directly, and said casually. He picked it up. He won't be able to use it for now. The lady pursed her lips. What a lucky bastard. The legend of the battlefield spectre is actually true. Even the god of giant wood fell to his hands. Ji Nan's footsteps paused slightly, and he stared ahead. Chapter 447. The female astral lord in front of Ji Nan was called Hua Zhenxiu, a astral lord who had been promoted for quite some time, but had never found a suitable astral world. This kind of astral lord was not rare at all, or it could be said that astral lords at Hua Zhenxiu's stage were the most numerous among the astral lords. Finding an astral world required luck. Even if one had enough resources and power, it was not easy to find an astral world that was suitable for oneself. And the guy that Hua Zhenxiu said had gotten lucky and picked up the 7th rank godhead from the battlefield spectre was another astral lord called Ren Fu. Ren Fu and Hua Zhenxiu were of the same generation. The two of them had interacted before, but they were not friends, and were even rivals. However, Ren Fu was the first to find an astral world that was suitable for him, and named it Great World of Responsibility, taking the meaning of great responsibility, and was now the master of a world. Ren Fu? Ji Nan rubbed his chin, and nodded to indicate that he understood. Hua Zhenxiu smiled with satisfaction, and then said, then I'll go in first. This woman specifically mentioned this to Ji Nan. To put it bluntly, it was both a test and a chess piece, to see if she could cause some trouble for Ren Fu. If something happened to Ren Fu, then she would have helped her vent her anger, and also learned some information about the mysterious black-robed man. No matter how you looked at it, it would not be a loss. When Hua Zhenxiu's figure disappeared, Ji Nan also followed her into the room at the back of the bar. This place could definitely be called a different world. Even if the Sky Mansion was a technological plane, it was hard to imagine that someone could create such a vast area in a secret underground room. In fact, this was not a technological method, but a small space created by the Astral Lord using their own laws. It did not belong to the Sky Mansion. Such a small space could only exist temporarily. If there was a need, any Star Lord could destroy it and not be trapped here. This was also the safety guarantee that the Astral Lords were willing to gather here. This gathering point was called the Secret Pavilion by the Astral Lords. The origin of the name was very simple. The bar outside was called the Dark Night Bar, nothing more. Just as Hua Zhenxiu had said, a small-scale auction was being held in the hidden pavilion. In this kind of auction, there was no such thing as an auctioneer. Any celestial lord that had something they wanted to sell would take the initiative to go to the stage and wait for the people below to bid. Of course, this was also because the value of the auction item had not reached the point where it would drive people crazy. Otherwise, the Star Lords present wouldn't mind ganging up on him. Ren Fu had only taken out the guardhood because several Tier 7 gods had fallen over the past few days. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to make a move. Ji Nan watched the auction coldly from the side. Firstly, he wasn't interested in the items being auctioned by these celestial lords, and secondly, he didn't have any money. Even if there was something he was interested in, he could just find out who bought it and go back to snatch it. There was no need to attract attention. Ren Fu was a very young man with a calm expression that made people feel that he was very reliable. At this time, he was putting the godhead of the giant wood god on the stage to start the auction. The news of him picking up a rank 7 divine deity was already known by many people, and it was Ren Fu himself who spread the news. The fact that so many celestial lords had come to the Dark Pavilion today was largely due to this news. Ladies and gentlemen, the rank 7 giant wood god's godhead. Ren Fu put the godhead on the stage and said to the people below with a faint smile, "Ladies and gentlemen, please place your bids first. The buyer can come up to inspect the goods. We will trade here, and from now on, we are even." What he meant was that he wouldn't admit it once he got off the stage. Whether the godhead was real or fake, there would definitely be people who doubted it. Rather than arguing endlessly, it was better to make things clear. I, Ren Fu, have no proof. Believe it or not, don't buy it if you don't. However, he didn't argue with people. The celestial lords below him still had their own methods of verification. "May I ask, fellow Daoist Ren, where did you pick up this godhead?" A celestial lord dressed like an old man asked, but he was asking about the origin of the godhead. The death of a Tier 7 god was not something that happened quietly. Someone would definitely know about it. Ren Fu didn't avoid the topic, and he gave the name of a frontline plane. It was a small plane that belonged to the world of gods, but not many people present knew about it. It was just an unknown plane. Some people began to contact their subordinates in secret, urgently investigating the situation in this plane to see if any god had fallen today. Some people started to bid without hesitation. Perhaps they just happened to be in that plane today, so they no longer doubted Ren Fu's words. Even so, the others didn't dare to bid rashly, who knew if it was a two-man act. Only one person's reaction surprised the people who noticed him. After Ji Yunan heard about the origin of the godhead, he turned and left immediately, with no intention of bidding anymore. This caused many celestial lords to suspect that this person was there and knew that Ren Fu was lying. Cooperating with the bidding might be a two-man act, but turning and leaving couldn't be a two-man act, right? At the front line, in a small plane of the world of gods, Ji Yunan's figure slowly appeared in a corner. Ren Fu is speaking the truth. Ji Yunan felt the presence around him, and he quickly confirmed that this was the place where the god of giant wood had fallen. After a god died, their presence did not disappear that easily. Perhaps the celestial lords could not use this, but in Ji Yunan's eyes, it was like a beacon. It was nighttime, but the plane was still filled with the flames of war. There was no resting time in a plane war. Who could it be? Ji Yunan walked through the flames of war. He didn't look like he was affected at all. He quickly arrived in a forest. This was the place where the god of giant wood's power was the thickest. Clearly, this god had fallen here. After he died, his rule did not disappear, and it created a forest of giant trees. Ji Yunan walked through the forest of giant trees. He checked every rule's presence, trying to find a rule that did not belong to the god of giant wood. He killed a god, but no one found out. That means it was an instant kill. After killing him, he didn't take the god's personality. That means he didn't aim to create a break world. As Ji Yunan walked, he kept thinking. It had to be said that this person imitated Ghost very well. He basically imitated every feature, and he didn't expose any of his own features. The weirdest thing was that he didn't expose any rule's presence. That was exactly the same as Ji Yunan. Either he was like me, and he used his body's power to kill, or he used the god's own rule. Ji Yunan didn't think it was weird. He just made a judgment. Comparing the two possibilities, it was obvious that the latter was more likely. Chapter 448. Black Robe. Upon seeing Ji Yunan, the other party quickly revealed a look of astonishment, and then said with a strange expression. Since Ji Yunan often appeared in the gathering places of the major astral lords in Abundant Sanctum, his identity of Black Robe had become quite well known. Long Jiayu was a rather famous astral lord in the circle of young astral lords. Her fame came from her special law, truth knowledge. The law of truth knowledge was essentially a branch of knowledge, and when it came to Long Jiayu, it could be described in another sentence. There was always only one truth. To put it simply, Long Jiayu was a detective astral lord. Her daily activities were to explore and study certain special events, and find the truth behind them. Are you also here to search for the battlefield specters? Long Jiayu asked Ji Yunan with a friendly smile on her face. This was a female astral lord with short brown hair, dressed in casual clothes. She looked harmless, but the actual age and nature of an astral lord could never be judged from her appearance. Yes. Ji Yunan nodded. Since she was already here, there was no need to hide it. I received a message from a friend, so I came here to take a look. Long Jiayu continued, from the looks of it, the god of giant wood has died here. It could also be an act by Ren Fu himself, Ji Yunan said casually. If he cooperated with the god of giant wood, it might not be impossible for him to do this. Long Jiayu was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, makes sense. She did not have Ji Yunan's ability to determine whether the god of giant wood was dead or not from its aura. Just by looking at the forest of giant trees, it could be caused by the death of the god, but it could also be created by the god himself. After letting the young detective guess blindly, Ji Yunan did not stay any longer and quickly disappeared. After he left, Long Jiayu looked at the forest of giant trees, then turned to look at the place where Ji Yunan disappeared, and a smile gradually appeared at the corner of her mouth. After confirming that the god of giant wood was dead and that it was done by a mysterious person, Ji Yunan stopped his investigation and continued his hunting journey. Of course, it could also be said that there were too few clues, and Ji Yunan had not yet found a direction to investigate, so he could only wait for the other party to expose himself. As long as his opponent continued to attack, this flaw would be exposed sooner or later. If possible, Ji Yunan did not mind killing this competitor. After all, his existence had seriously damaged the hunting ecology and would attract more attention to his identity as a spectre. Ren Fu's god personality was bought by another planet leader for a big price. Then, it disappeared. Clearly, he was trying to become a break-world being. Because of Ren Fu's previous publicity, the number of people who knew about the battlefield spectre gradually increased. Perhaps it was precisely because of this that Ji Yunan didn't notice the appearance of another spectre in the next few days. He simply sped up, and the number of gods he killed every day increased. After half a month, Ji Yunan's sin value was close to the 60,000 mark. A large number of gods and planet leaders died, which made it difficult for both sides. The war began to enter the next stage. The next stage was, of course, a higher-level battle. Usually, the victory or defeat of the previous stage determined the order of the next stage. In terms of overall numbers, there were many small planes with a slower flow of time, so the worlds undoubtedly had a big advantage. However, after entering the next stage, the worlds that did not have the motivation to attack by high-level planet lords were a bit inferior. Often, a world planet lord would find that there were several gods of the same level squatting on the opposite side, and in the end, they could only turn around and escape. On the other hand, Ji Yunan was more and more like a fish in water. No matter what level of god you were, as long as you were ambushed by him, very few could escape. It was just that during this time, the other spectre appeared less and less, so Ji Yunan never really caught it. Only when the war entered the realm level did that spectre rarely appear again, completely concealing all traces of him. Ji Yunan did not really care. As long as no one stole business from him, he did not care who was pretending to be him. It was none of his business anyway. However, there was one thing that even Ji Yunan did not expect: the other spectre was not a single person, but a group of people. In a small plain at the front line of the worlds, a few black-clothed men were talking. Those gods are starting to get smarter, and they are getting harder and harder to deal with. This time, we almost failed miserably. One of them complained. His face was still a bit pale, and there were obviously some injuries on his body. Another voice continued, the gods that appeared now are at least level 7 and above, indeed not easy to deal with. The giant wood god last time was only successfully killed because he was countered by us. The injured black-clothed man could not help but say, I really don't know who the real spectre is. I heard that he is still hunting gods. Yes. The leader nodded lightly, no emotions could be seen on his face. TSK, which big shot is it? It must be at least a heaven rank figure. The black-clothed men could not help but discuss, guessing the true identity of the spectre. Finally, it was the leader who interrupted them. Let's not talk about this. He coughed lightly and said, the war between the two worlds is our chance. Try to collect as much faith power as possible so that the leader can return as soon as possible. We understand. The black-clothed men replied in unison. The war had been going on for close to 2.5 months. The gods that participated were getting stronger and stronger, but the pace of the war was gradually slowing down. Usually, there would be half a month of peace before a great war broke out. Even high-level gods and astral lords would appear. Such a situation gave Ji Nan a headache, because it was not convenient for him to fish in troubled waters. Just 2 days ago, he had just seen the fall of a level 7 god, but he did not make a move until the end. There was no other reason than there were too many astral lords around, and it was not worth it to fight a mere level 7 god. If it was a level 8 god, Ji Nan might have fought to kill him. However, this experience also made Ji Nan understand that the good days of taking advantage of the chaos to harvest at will were almost over. Next, he had to gradually raise his target level. He could not always make small profits with quick turnover. He had to start preparing for the path of eating for 3 years. At this time, a message from the God Nation appeared in front of Ji Nan. Shi Daotian, who had been silent for a long time, finally could not help but contact Ji Nan when the war gradually escalated into a confrontation between the higher-ups. Just in time. Ji Nan's lips curled into a faint smile as he looked at the detailed information of the target given in the message. It was a stranger that he was familiar with. Demon Lord Alfred, a master of arson from hell. He had never met Ji Nan, but they had heard of each other's names. Alfred was also an important member of the Celestial Society. He had joined the society long ago, so his name had naturally been reported to Ji Nan. Chapter 449. Demon Lord Alfred, if converted to a god, would be somewhere between the 9th and the 10th level. He was also an existence with godhood. Demon lords even had an innate advantage over ordinary gods. They naturally had a large territory in hell, and all the demons there could be developed into believers. Compared to ordinary gods who had to work hard to find believers after igniting their godfire, demon lords could not have it any easier. This kind of demon lord was naturally Ji Nan's hunting target. But under normal circumstances, he wouldn't target a demon lord. The reason was simple. Demon lords mostly had a lot of enemies, so they were very careful about hiding their location. Even Ji Nan would find it difficult to find them. However, he did not mind taking action this time, because the most difficult part had already been completed by Shi Daotian. In Shi Daotian, Fang Chaoyun and his eldest disciple, Lin Huan, were also discussing Ji Nan's mission. Master, do you think Ji Nan will accept this mission? Lin Huan asked without much confidence. This time, he had found out Alfred's identity by chance and specifically found the hiding place of this demon lord. That was why he had sent the mission to Ji Nan. Of course, this was also if Alfred really participated in the battle. Otherwise, their intentions would be too obvious, and it would not be in line with Shi Daotian's upright style of doing things. If someone questioned them now, they could just say that they did not know Alfred's identity. Fang Chaoyun put down the pen in his hand, thought for a moment, and said, "It's hard to say. I hope that he did not agree. Alfred is an important member of the Celestial Society. If Ji Nan really acts against him, there will be a huge conflict between the two sides," Lin Huan said excitedly. Fang Chaoyun did not say anything. Lin Huan continued, "Even if Ji Nan acts in secret and hides this matter, we will have something to use against him." "Enough," Fang Chaoyun said in a low voice. "This is almost despicable. I will let it go this time, but do not use it again in the future." Lin Huan was startled and quickly bowed to admit his mistake. Fortunately, Fang Chaoyun did not intend to pursue the matter and had his disciple quickly leave. Lin Huan only heaved a sigh of relief after he left Fang Chaoyun's study. He became even more determined. His master was a righteous gentleman, which was why he was schemed against by that scoundrel Ji Nan time and again. His master was not completely a Confucian, but he did not have so many scruples. Lin Huan's mind was very clear. He knew that his grandmaster's greatest enemy was the Heavenly God Society and Old Man Zi Luo. On the other hand, Ji Nan and the Heavenly God Association weren't completely of one mind, so it wasn't impossible for them to think of a way to divide and conquer. If they could pick on each other, that would be great. As Lin Huan thought so, even his footsteps became lighter. He felt the thrill of winning a battle 1,000 miles away. Ji Nan had already returned to his divine kingdom. He played the two identities of Ghost and Black Robe, mainly appearing at the front lines of the war between the two worlds. It wasn't difficult for him to return to the heavenly worlds. Demon Lord Alfred's mission had been handed to him, but the details couldn't be sent over the phone. He had to return to his divine kingdom. Moreover, Ji Yunan didn't say that he would definitely accept it. "Tell Fang Chaoyun that I'll consider this matter," Ji Yunan said to the envoy from Shidaotian, his face expressionless. When he returned to the evil god's temple, Red Tail immediately went to Ji Yunan. "Sir, do you want to accept the Demon Lord's mission?" Although it was a question, her tone didn't sound too surprised, as if she had already known the answer. After all, she already knew that Ji Yunan had deliberately made a move against Magnificent Heaven, so it didn't matter if he fell out with the Heavenly God Society. "Of course I want to accept it." Ji Yunan smiled. "However, if the order is different, it'll be completely different." Red Tail was slightly stunned. She didn't understand what Ji Yunan meant. "Prepare to start a war in Divine Kingdom," Ji Yunan said calmly. He didn't intend to explain further. Hence, Red Tail didn't ask any more questions. She nodded and left. The greatest strength of this old subordinate of Ji Yunan was that he knew what to ask and what not to ask. Ji Yunan glanced at his interface. After 2.5 months of frenzied hunting, his sin points had reached close to 80,000, and he was getting closer and closer to the standard of level 10. One of the more interesting things about the game was that the sin points requirement for the second-class advancement wasn't a fixed number. Instead, it was related to the player's previous gaming experience. In other words, if a player wanted to advance to level 10, they had to sum up all their previous experiences and come up with a single requirement. Because Ji Yunan had always pursued the highest efficiency, the requirement for level 10 sin points was around 130,000. Compared to now, he was probably still short of 1.5 level 10 gods. A demon lord like Alfred has a lot of faith in hell, so his actual sin points should be about the same as a level 10 god. It wasn't that Ji Yunan hadn't killed a demon lord before, so he had some experience. If he could determine the location, a demon lord would indeed be an easy target to kill. It would be much easier than finding a level 10 god to kill. If one alferis was equivalent to 30,000 sin points, then there was still a gap of about 20,000 that needed 2 level 9 gods to fill, 2 level 9 gods. "I can make it all in one go." Lin Huan finally received a reply from Ji Yunan, and the latter's answer was undoubtedly yes. "You deserve it." Lin Huan couldn't help but sneer. He had already prepared a plan. As long as Ji Yunan was indeed involved in killing Alfred, it would be difficult for him to get away from this matter. With this matter in hand, Ji Yunan would forever have a weakness that he could use against him. Perhaps Ji Yunan would become an extremely important chess piece at a critical moment in the future. Lin Huan didn't delay. He immediately wrote a document and sent it to the frontline command center. This was an order to command 4 high-level Star Lords to work together to encircle and kill a demon lord. Although he wasn't strong enough, Lin Huan felt like he was in control of the world when he could command a high-level Star Lord like this. When Chu Tian Zhong Shuyan, when Daotian Yixing, and an old acquaintance of Ji Yunan's, Bone World's White Bone True Lord, these 3 were Ji Yunan's teammates. The first 2 came from Shidaotian and were true brothers, while White Bone True Lord was hired by Shidaotian at a huge price to help deal with a high-level god, the Great Star Lord. Of course, the war between the two worlds had already reached this point, and no one could say that they were uninvolved. After all, their family and friends were affected, and White Bone True Lord was no exception. It could be said that Shidaotian had used most of his trump cards to deal with the demon lord. Chapter 450. "Friend Ji Yunan is here," Zhong Shuyan said with a smile when he saw Ji Yunan. Zhong Shuyan was an elegant-looking middle-aged man. Even though his astral world was called Wenchu, he called Ji Yunan friend, which was weird. His junior brother, Yixing, was cold and aloof. He didn't even look at immortal Whitebone, let alone Ji Yunan. He had been resting with his eyes closed. When Whitebone Lord heard this, he looked at Ji Yunan with surprise. He didn't expect Ji Yunan to participate in a hunt of this level. Ji Yunan saw that Zhong Shuyan had revealed his identity, so he stopped hiding and showed his face. But he was already complaining in his heart. Shidaotian's people are so troublesome. If he said he was going to reveal his identity, he could have just told him to stop hiding. He didn't have to ask Zhong Xuyen to do this. After they greeted each other, White Bone Lord was the first to say, "The Devil Lord can change his position at any time. We have to hurry." The other three had no objections. They immediately rushed to the God's world. It had to be said that in order to not give Ji Yunan any chance to regret, Lin Huan had put in a lot of effort. He had mobilized all the power he had. Shi Daotian and Shi Daotian were both level 9 heaven-class starry lords. White Bone Lord's power was far beyond his level. He was not afraid of fighting heaven-class. Together with Ji Yunan, they were very confident in dealing with the Devil Lord. The front lines were still fighting. But compared to 2 months ago, it was much more tragic and bloody. Nowadays, the gods rarely took action. Too many devout believers lost their last drop of blood and died on the battlefield, but they still couldn't get any blessings from the gods. If their god were to show his face, he might even lose his life. Of course, this had nothing to do with Ji Yunan and the others. They flew as fast as they could, heading into the god's world. Demon Lord Alfred was an elite who had never been on the battlefield, but he had a shocking influence on the situation. The worlds used to kill gods to make up for the Breakworld people. That way, they had an endless supply of fighting power. That was a method of fighting. It made the gods very miserable. But there were capable people among the gods. Alfred had come up with a plan to use the gods' world's dead spirit reincarnation method to turn enemies on the battlefield into dead spirits. To do this, they needed a large number of necromancers. It was too late to train them from humans. So, demons with dark elements were the best substitutes. Letting demons grasp simple undead spells and then rush to the battlefield to become undead conversion machines was extremely efficient and had already been put to use. The dead spirit reincarnation method is perfect. Killing him won't help. Zhong Xuyen sighed. But at least we can vent. Now that the method of undead reincarnation has been perfected, killing him won't help. Zhong Xuyen sighed again. But at least we can vent our anger. Only a Star Lord like him, who had devoted himself to the war, knew how much trouble the undead reincarnation secret technique had brought them. This seemingly amiable middle-aged Confucian scholar seemed to be far from being as calm as he appeared. Ji Yunan wasn't interested in the main battlefield. His gaze fell to the back of the crowd. That's Fel Tyran, right? Is this still the frontline command center? Zhong Xuyen nodded. Still. Fel Tyran was still the largest frontline plane, and it was also the place where the highest number of high-level gods gathered. With a faint smile, Ji Yunan asked, "After we kill Alfred, do you want to take a stroll around this place?" All three of them were advanced Star Lords, and they immediately understood what Ji Yunan meant. They all looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. After a long time, Zhong Xuyen forced a smile and said, "You must be joking, fellow Daoist Ji Yu. There are at least 3 level 9 deities and a level 10 deity overseeing Fel Tillen. After we complete our mission, we should retreat as soon as possible." Now that the battle had escalated, Fel Tillen was naturally heavily guarded. It had truly become the gates of hell. Ji Yunan only nodded lightly and did not speak again. No one knew what he was thinking. On the 89th level of hell, Alfred shook hands with the demon lord of this level and signed a demon supply treaty. Currently, he had become the spokesperson of the entire hell, recommending demons to the front lines and exchanging resources from the hands of the gods. For a demon lord, giving away some unruly demons in exchange for precious resources that could be used to develop their territory was definitely an unimaginably good thing. In any case, those guys would be executed even if they were not sent away, and how they were managed in the hands of the gods was none of the demon lord's business. 300 kilograms of parasitic flaming soil rock. It's a deal. The demon overlord of the 89th floor was a strange demon with the appearance of a female. She smiled charmingly at Alfred. Alfred smiled faintly. "As long as the demons under your command are in place, resources won't be a problem. Madam, this is the reputation of the gods, not mine." The female demon nodded in satisfaction and sent Alfred away. She knew that he would definitely take a cut from this deal, but someone like that had to exist, right? Alfred was also very satisfied. This time, He had used his silver tongue to successfully lower the price to a very low level. This meant that his joy hadn't even truly faded away when a wisp of warning suddenly appeared in his heart. Alfred's crisis premonition ability as a high-level god allowed him to instantly activate his law, attempting to pull himself into the void of space to avoid any possible attacks. However, what he did not expect was that what came next was not an attack, but a method to isolate himself. The words suppress and seal appeared out of thin air, dragging Alfred into a strange space. There were already a few figures waiting for him inside. Zhong Shuyan was not worried about being heard by the other party and said bluntly, "Let's finish this quickly. Our power won't last long in hell." Without needing him to say anything, everyone else had already acted. Yixing raised the brush in his hand, but he did not write anything. Instead, he used the brush as a sword and stabbed it toward Alfred. The law of the white-bone true monarch enveloped the demon lord. It was as if he was instantly surrounded by endless white bones as countless bone spikes stabbed toward him from all directions. However, Alfred was not a useless person. In this moment of life and death, he was extremely decisive. He allowed the white bones to stab into his body and ignored the boiling demon flames as he swept toward Yixing's brush. He wanted to use this method of cutting off one's wrist to force a way out. However, just as the demon flames engulfed him, a shadow suddenly appeared behind the demon lord, making him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. How could someone be able to completely conceal themselves in a place like this? This is the power of shadows. Could it be that Sylvia? No. It's Ji Yunan. The shadow sword pierced through Alfred's chest. This demon lord turned around with a ferocious expression and stared coldly at Ji Yunan. Chapter 451. The three of them would work together to trap Alfred, and Ji Yunan would deal the fatal blow. This was the strategy they had agreed on earlier. Knowing how Snow Celestial Claudia died, and Ji Yunan's terrifying assassination ability, it was not surprising that Shi Daotian would come up with such a strategy. Perhaps it was precisely because of Ji Yunan's existence that they dared to send 4 powerhouses deep into the Pantheon world to hunt down this demon lord. As long as they could kill Alfred in a short time, it would not be difficult for them to retreat, unless a lord intervened. Under Ji Yunan's attack, the demon lord's laws melted like snow in spring. His aura weakened in the blink of an eye, and he lost most of his life force. This powerhouse, who was a level 9 or higher, could not even withstand a single blow from Ji Yunan, even though the latter was only a level 8. The body of the evil god was stronger than those of the same level, and he had put all his skill points into close combat. Therefore, once Ji Yunan got close, even a level 10 powerhouse would not feel good if he took a blow, much less a level 9. Don't give him the chance. Although the White Bone Lord was shocked, he was a powerhouse who had fought his way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and reacted quickly. The white bones that filled the sky suddenly lit up, and white flames rose from the bone spurs, burning towards Alfred. Zhong Shuyan and Ye Xing attacked as well, knowing that they could not give their opponents a chance to catch their breath. However, they had underestimated the weight of the word traitor. This demon lord did not even run, and his fists, which were covered in demonic flames, landed heavily on Ji Yunan's chest. How much hatred! This was the first time Ji Yunan, who had always been fearless of his own life, had met someone who was not afraid of death, and could not dodge in time. The demonic flames from hell assaulted his body, and his body and mind were tested by the high temperature. However, Ji Yunan did not even bat an eyelid. He returned the favor with a merciless punch. Alfred's entire face immediately caved in, as if a deep pit had appeared on his face. The attacks from the other 3 finally arrived. The White Bone Immortal's bone fire burned the demon lord's divine soul instantly, causing the latter to scream miserably. As for Zhong Shuyan and Yi Xing, they had dealt a fatal blow to Alfred. With a single word and a single brush, they had completely severed the demon overlord's life. Of course, the instant before Alfred died, Ji Yunan added another punch without hesitation. In the end, players were still better at stealing kills. Zhong Shuyan did not care about who the head belonged to. Seeing that the demon overlord had fallen, she immediately said, "Hurry up and leave. The major gods might arrive at any moment." Immortal Whitebone glanced at Ji Yunan, who was still burning with devil flames, which didn't seem to be extinguished at all. His movements were not slow either. He had already flown out of the plane, but he still asked Ji Yunan, "How are you?" "I'm fine." Ji Yunan smiled, completely ignoring that he was about to become a Super Saiyang. "But you. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to leave." The white bone immortal was slightly startled. He immediately turned his head, and sure enough, there was a flash of divine light in Fertilan's direction. Zhong Xuyen could not help but grit his teeth. He did not expect the Pantheon world to react so quickly. It was as if they had long since prepared for this. He could only shout, "Split up." They were all high-level Star-Lords. If they split up, they might still be able to escape. If they gathered together, they would only end up being wiped out at the same time. Yixing still did not say a word, but he obviously followed his senior brother's lead. Without another word, he changed directions and fled. However, no one expected that at this moment, Ji Yunan would suddenly turn around and rush towards Fertilan, shouting as if he was going to die a martyr's death. "You guys go." Ji Yunan shouted at the three. "My body has been ignited by the devil flames. I don't have much hope of escaping. Let me go block the pursuers." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure was already rushing towards Fertilan. He had no intention of negotiating with the three at all. This time, even Zhong Xuyen and Yixing were stunned. This was Ji Yunan, the despicable, shameless, and unscrupulous Ji Yunan that senior brother Fang had described. They believed that if they were in his shoes, they would definitely not make such a choice even if their chances of survival were slightly lower. It was not certain death. Hey, the situation wasn't that bad, was it? How could it be this bad? But no matter what the three thought, no one could stop Ji Yunan. They could only try their best to escape and not waste the opportunity that Ji Yunan had painstakingly created. The four beams of light left in four different directions. Thus, only Ji Yunan arrived at Fertilan alone, facing the group of high-level gods. Zhong Xuyen's information had some errors. Apart from the 10th level, there were not 3 9th level, but 4. Speaking of which, this 10th level expert had met Ji Yunan before. They could be considered acquaintances. The super expert of the Darkness God system, Skeleton Sage Stevenson, had once assisted Daoist Spirit's son in killing the Darkness God Lewis. It was also at that time that he had met Ji Yunan. "It's you." Stevenson saw Ji Yunan's face, then saw the devil flames burning on his body. He already knew what had happened. "It's me." Ji Yunan allowed the devil flames to burn on his body as he spoke with a faint smile. He did not mind exchanging a few more words with the other party and telling his 3 teammates to scram. There were 4 9th level gods behind the skeleton sage. They looked at Ji Yunan with cold eyes, as if they were looking at a dead man. Naturally, the devil flames had already exposed Ji Yunan's true cultivation level. A mere 8th level being surrounded by such a powerful lineup should not have any chance of escaping. Stevenson sighed softly. "We can be considered acquaintances, but, did you really kill Alfred?" Very few people knew that because the skeleton sage was acquainted with Daoist Spirit's son, he had some understanding of the Celestial Society. Naturally, he knew of the relationship between Ji Yunan and the Demon Lord. Thus, it was even more difficult for him to understand why Ji Yunan would act against Alfred. "It was me." Ji Yunan nodded and repeated the 2 words again. Then, he grinned. "Not only did I kill him, but I was also the one who passed the information to you." His words startled everyone at the same time. They were able to discover the abnormality so quickly and discover that Alfred had been attacked because someone had secretly passed the information to them about the Demon Lord. However, that person seemed to have deliberately delayed the information. By the time they confirmed the content of the information, the Demon Lord had already fallen, and they were only able to catch the murderer. This matter should have only been known by the higher-ups, but the other party could see through it. Was it really him who passed the information? "Were you forced to act?" the skeleton sage asked with a frown. He thought about it and could only come up with this reason.